Chapter 1460. Come on, drink this. In the hotel of the Western Heaven Palace, Noah brought a bottle of red potion to Hui Na's mouth. Hui Na obediently drank the potion that was delivered to her mouth little by little. Looking at Hui Na, who was lying in her arms with a tired face, Yoli couldn't wait to ask Noah. Hui Na should be okay, right? It's okay, Noah responded casually as he fed the potion to Hui Na. Just like before, it's just a burden on the body caused by using, invite God to descend. It's not a big deal. Drink this potion, and it won't take long for you to recover. Yoli's pretty face, which had been tense all the time, gradually relaxed. Beside her, Erica and Liliana, who were sitting and resting, were not injured, but they had consumed too much of their spell power. They explained the situation to Alice, who had been staying in the hotel. Even Athena has appeared. Alice sighed. Now, more and more god-slayers and disobedient gods have gathered. For the people of this country, this should be an unprecedented disaster, right? Liliana said with a sad face. I guess the force called the History Compilation Committee should be having a headache now, right? Perhaps, as Athena said, an unprecedented upheaval is about to happen in this country, Erica said calmly. Multiple god-slayers and disobedient gods have appeared in this country, and there are also unknown heroes sleeping in a corner of this island. Coupled with the god ancestor who has been eyeing this country covetously, the turmoil is inevitable. Upon hearing Erica's words, a sorrowful expression appeared on Yuli's face. Even the exhausted Hui Na let out a bitter laugh. She clearly felt that the future was going to be tough. Noah curled his lips and said so. Since the last king is sleeping in this island, then this turmoil will come sooner or later. Since it will come sooner or later, then it is already destined to be unavoidable. Why should we feel a headache now? Even Alice, Erica, and Liliana couldn't help but laugh bitterly when they heard this. However, Noah was right. Since the last king was sleeping in this island, it was only a matter of time before chaos broke out. Now, it was just a moment. What I am more concerned about now is the movements of the other godslayers. Noah turned his gaze to Alice. The chaos here should have spread throughout the entire magic world. The rest of the deicide should know about what happened here. Although I don't know if they already know about the existence and whereabouts of the last king, they shouldn't do anything unusual, right? For the demon kings who were born to be the source of chaos and the center of conflict, perhaps there was nothing more attractive to them than a hero who specialized in annihilating the demon kings. If the rest of the godslayers knew about the existence and whereabouts of the last king, it would not be strange for them to all gather in this island country. When that time came, it would truly be the end of the world. All 7 of the god-slayers were gathered in one place. That was a terrifying result that no one wanted to imagine. After all, no one would put 7 nuclear bombs that could explode at any time together, right? Who knew if one of them would suddenly go crazy and explode, igniting all the other nuclear bombs and causing a big explosion together? That scene could only be said to be too beautiful and no one dared to look at it. In this regard, Alice seemed to have a deep understanding of this and smiled elegantly. I have already contacted the Sage Parliament and asked them to report to me the current movements of the God Slayers all over the world. According to the report from the Sage Parliament, at present, the movements of the 7 God Slayers in the world were as follows. Marquis Warban was staying in his villa in Austria and did not do anything unusual. Bishop Luo Hao was discovered this morning to have returned to Mount Lu in China and did not come out. Madame Aisha's current whereabouts were unknown and there was no news at all. However, this situation had been maintained for many years, so there should be no abnormalities. John Plato Smith was still in Los Angeles, North America. He was leading the good faction's magicians to deal with the evil faction's magicians. If there were no accidents, he would not have the time to wander around other countries. The idiot Tony was taking Andre to East Asia. There seemed to be signs of the god of disobedience there, which made Tony very interested. So far, there were no signs of changes in the itinerary. As for Alexander, just as you think, that guy is currently hiding in this country. Alice reported the current movements of the god slayers to Noah one by one. Then, the rest is you. That should go without saying, right? As she said this, Alice looked at Noah with a somewhat strange expression. Even her pretty face was a little flushed. Seeing Alice in such a state, Liliana asked curiously. "Princess, what's wrong?" "No, it's nothing." Alice coughed deliberately and glanced at Noah. "I think it's better for you to not know for the time being, although you will find out sooner or later." While this sentence made Liliana puzzled, it also made Erica raise her eyebrows and cast an inquisitive look at Noah. Obviously, even though she didn't know what had happened, Erica still guessed that Noah must have done something. In this regard, Noah just glanced at Alice a little unnaturally. As a result, Alice's pretty face became even redder. The way she looked at Noah was as if she was looking at a wolf in sheep's clothing. It was very strange. Seeing Alice's reaction, and thinking that she now knew the movements of the various god slayers, Noah knew what was going on. Alice must have already heard the rumor that Noah had taken Luo Hao as his concubine. Chapter 1461. Crash. The sound of the waves reverberated in the silent night, filling the air with a tranquil atmosphere, calming the hearts of the people. The goddess, who was famous for her beauty, was currently standing on the beach where waves were constantly crashing. She was looking at the endless ocean, her robes fluttering in the wind, adding a sense of beauty to the tranquil atmosphere. If this was just an ordinary night, such a scene would definitely make anyone who saw it fall into a trance. Unfortunately, this was not an ordinary night. If someone was here, they would definitely notice it. Now, it was not even noon yet, let alone night. However, even though it was not even noon yet, the sky here was as dark as night. There was not even a full moon or stars. All the light had disappeared without a trace in this area, leaving not a single trace. It was not an exaggeration to say that this was an environment where one could not even see one's fingers. Anyone who could move normally in such an environment would definitely not be an ordinary person. Under such circumstances, the goddess named Athena looked at the scenery of the ocean and murmured. Sure enough, the battlefield should be on the sea. In fact, the sea god Poseidon was Athena's archenemy. At least, in Greek legends, the relationship between Athena and Poseidon could only be described as enemies. In Greek mythology, Poseidon, the sea god who ruled the sea, was quite aggressive and ambitious. He always wanted to seize the throne of Zeus, the king of the gods. However, he was discovered by Zeus and was banished to the ground. However, Poseidon's divinity had an aggressive side, which made him unable to rest in peace and often fought with the gods. For this reason, Athena and Poseidon also fought in the myths and formed a grudge. However, Athena, who regarded Poseidon as an enemy, did not hate the sea ruled by the sea god because of this. This was because the sea and the earth were the source of life. As the goddess of life and death, Athena could not hate the sea. What Athena really hated was the sun. The sun could illuminate the sky that was controlled by Zeus, who had always been bullying Métis, who was equivalent to Athena's avatar. Zeus had also reduced Athena to his own daughter and expelled the darkness, driving out the night of Athena, the goddess of darkness, causing the sky to fall into the hands of Zeus. If there was no sun, the sky would be Athena's domain. Athena's darkness would occupy the entire sky, and every corner of the sky would be under her control. However, it was because of the sun that Athena's darkness was unable to take over the sky, preventing the night from descending. As a result, the sky had always been Zeus' domain. That was why the queen of the night, Athena, was truly unhappy with the existence of the sun that could expel the darkness. Of course, Athena's pride would not allow her to admit that the reason why the goddess hated the sun was because the sun was the nemesis of the goddess of earth. As the god of death who controls hell, as the goddess of darkness who brings the night, as well as the goddess of earth who is the source of life, no matter which attribute it is, the sun firmly restrains Athena. After all, since ancient times, not only was light able to expel darkness, but it was also believed to be able to expel ghosts and undead, preventing contact with hell. On the other hand, the earth could only thrive and obtain life under the sun's illumination. As the queen of hell, darkness, and earth, Athena's attributes were completely restrained by the sun. This was also one of the reasons why Athena hated the sun. Every time Athena appeared, it would be accompanied by the arrival of night. This was an important reason. Even if Athena regained her identity as the queen of the Trinity, she would not want to move around under the sun, so, I have to choose the sea. With this thought in mind, Athena's eyes that gazed at the sea emitted an evil glint. Her eyes were like an owl's, but also like a snake's. The common point was that they were extremely cold. Being stared at by these eyes would definitely bring death to humans in an instant. Under the gaze of such a pair of sinister eyes, the surging waves in front of Athena came to a halt as though time had come to a halt. Rumble, the sea suddenly trembled for no reason, and as if there was a volcanic eruption at the bottom of the sea, it suddenly surged violently. Crash! Accompanied by a loud sound of water, an island separated from the surface of the water and slowly rose up. It was a stone island. Whether it was the ground, the trees, or the grass, they were all made of stone. Such a stone island separated from the surface of the water and rose from the bottom of the sea. Not long after, it floated above the surface of the sea and stopped trembling as if it had been there from the beginning. When the stone island completely floated above the surface of the water, Athena's evil eyes dimmed little by little, but an extremely beautiful smile appeared on her face. Yes, this is it. Only this is suitable to be the battlefield of the goddess of earth. Although Athena's attributes were more complicated in mythology, after regaining her identity as the queen of the Trinity, Athena's essence was only left with one. Snake. The snake goddess who had been banished by the heroes of the Steel Empire and attacked by them. Since this is the battlefield of fate, only this can best represent Athena's snake. Looking at the stone island that she created with her authority and divine power, Athena let out an innocent and joyful laugh like an ordinary girl. Upon closer inspection, one could see that there were many statues on the stone island. Each of them was made of stone, and their faces were filled with panic, despair, wailing, and fear. They were lifelike human statues that made people feel a chill in their hearts. Gazing at these creepy statues, the smile on Athena's beautiful face became wider and wider. Although this is just a scene created by my authority, and not those stupid warriors that once challenged my clone, it is enough to serve as a foil. Yes. Whether it was the island that originally only existed in mythology, or the statues that once challenged the Medusa, but were turned into stone, they were just foils. Athena only cared about the man that had a deep relationship with her. It was precisely because of this that Athena enjoyed all of this from the bottom of her heart. She enjoyed the whole process of preparing to meet that man again and determine the winner on the battlefield. For Athena, this was something to be intoxicated with. "My fated enemy, hurry up and come to me," Athena murmured expectantly. "I can't wait any longer." While murmuring the words of a young girl who missed her sweetheart, the smile on Athena's face suddenly disappeared without any reason. Soon after, Athena suddenly opened her mouth in anger. "Leave here, maid, this is a place that I prepared for that person, it is not a place that you can set foot in." Along with Athena's angry shout, the sand on the beach suddenly rolled up and turned into a giant snake. It opened its bloody mouth and pounced towards the grass in the distance. Bang! In the midst of the explosion, the giant snake that used its huge head to hit the ground shook the violent impact and dust, causing the ground to tremble and crack. Then, in the impact and dust, a figure of light rushed out and burst into the distance, disappearing without a trace in an instant. Seeing this, Athena snorted, turned her head, and continued to look at the creepy rocky island. As if thinking of that man again, she revealed a charming smile. At the same time, the figure of light that escaped from Athena's attack swept into the distant horizon. After a long time, it stopped and revealed its full appearance. Impressively, it was Guinevere. Guinevere's face was a little pale, cold sweat dripping down, and he muttered to himself with some lingering fear. I didn't expect Athena to be so obsessed with the relationship with that king. She didn't even give me a chance to speak before attacking. Originally, Guinevere wanted to try to cooperate with Athena to deal with Noah. But now it seemed that Athena would not agree to let anyone interfere with her relationship with Noah. There's no other way, I can only give up on Athena's side. Guinevere was extremely unwilling to turn into a stream of light and rushed in another direction. Chapter 1462. An island has appeared by the sea. In the hotel, Noah, who was still worrying about where to go, immediately received the shocking news. An island? Hui Na asked curiously. Why would an island suddenly appear? I don't know. Mr. Gansu just called and told me about it. He asked me to report it to the king. Yoli shook his head. If we can get closer, we might be able to get more information. But Athena seems to be there, and the people of the History Compilation Committee don't dare to get too close. In other words, it should be Athena's doing, right? Liliana said with a stern expression. To be able to create an island out of thin air, no other power in the world can do such a miracle except for the power of the god of disobedience and the god of deicide. But why would Athena create an island? Hui Na didn't understand. What's the point of doing that? I'm afraid that's the battlefield that Athena mentioned, right? Erica said. In order to face the opponent that she acknowledged, in order to fight against the man of her destiny, Athena prepared the stage. It was a battlefield that she created with the consciousness to perform the final glory of her life, whether it was for the king or for Athena. But since Athena didn't hesitate to create an island, it shouldn't be an ordinary island, right? Alice pondered for a moment and asked Noah tentatively. Do you need me to use my spirit body avatar to take a look? No, it's better not to do that. Noah rejected Alice's proposal. To Athena, humans are like weeds. They are of no importance. If you barge into Athena's territory, you might be attacked. She is the god of the underworld who controls death. Even if you use your spirit body avatar, she might have a way to hurt you. That would be too dangerous, Yoli hurriedly advised. Miss Alice, it's better not to do that. You're right, Alice said helplessly. Although I'm a little curious and concerned about the island, it's better not to approach it casually since it's dangerous. At least, it's best not to approach it without the company of a god slayer who can fight the goddess. But at least we understand one thing, Erica declared. That is, Athena is indeed very interested in having a showdown with our king. Everyone nodded in agreement. The gods of disobedience were originally a group of transcendental existences that had been devoured by madness. They were only normal when they were in the realm of the undead, which was the world of myths and legends. If they appeared on the ground, they would immediately fall into a certain obsession, and for that, they would not hesitate to disturb the world and slaughter living beings. For Athena, Noah was her obsession to appear in the world. If she didn't end things with Noah, the goddess would probably chase after Noah until the end of the world, even if the world fell apart and the universe was destroyed. In fact, at the end of the day, Noah and Athena didn't have much contact with each other. It was only because of a chance encounter that they became friends. If Noah hadn't met Athena, he wouldn't have found the stone of Gorgon by tracking Athena's whereabouts. If Noah hadn't found the stone of Gorgon, he wouldn't have been targeted by Athena. If Noah hadn't been targeted by Athena back then, she wouldn't have schemed to lure Warban, Luohao, and Tony to him. If Noah hadn't defeated the three god slayers because Warban, Luohao, and Tony were lured by Athena, Athena wouldn't have looked at Noah in a new light and started to pay attention to Noah. After that, Noah and Athena formed an alliance together in Naples to fight Perseus. After a series of disputes, they formed a deeper relationship and made an agreement. Thinking of this, Noah couldn't help but think of the agreement he made with Athena in Naples. At that time, Noah and Athena made an agreement that there would be a real winner one day. At that time, if Noah won, then Athena would be able to stay by Noah's side forever as a guardian and fight with Noah. And if Noah lost, then Noah would be at Athena's disposal. In fact, the reason why he made such an agreement was entirely because of a whim. As for Athena, Noah felt that it was inconceivable. Noah had always been the kind of person who would be good to others if others were good to him. If others were to find fault with him, then he would return the favor tenfold or even 100-fold. Undoubtedly, the goddess had caused a lot of trouble for Noah in order to retrieve the stone of Gorgon, but Noah didn't dislike Athena at all. Instead, as he got along with Athena, he was gradually attracted by the goddess' pride and charm. That feeling was not love, but it was a kind of specious thing. Presumably, Athena must have felt the same way, which was why she was so obsessed with Noah. If this kind of feeling had to be described with something, then it could only be described by Athena. Fate. This was the fate between Noah and Athena. To put it bluntly, it was just a kind of ill-fated relationship. However, whether it was Noah or Athena, because of this ill-fated relationship, they began to pursue each other. Athena said, no matter what, she was the only one who could bring death to Noah. Noah had said the same thing. In any case, the person who could defeat Athena must be him. From then on, the fate between Noah and Athena had reached a deep-rooted state and could not be forcibly broken. Therefore, when she sensed that the last king was likely to wake up at any time to conquer the demon king and the god slayer, Athena was eager to recapture the stone of Gorgon, restore the power of the Trinity, and end things with Noah. However, when he saw Athena again, Noah was not as eager to fight as Athena. Otherwise, Noah wouldn't have chosen to watch from the sidelines during the confrontation with Athena and sent Erica and the other girls to accept Athena's challenge. Then, he used the victory of a subordinate's competition as an excuse to make the prideful Athena leave as a loser. Because Noah believed that if she lost a duel, with Athena's self-esteem, she would never be like a stray dog, unwilling to accept defeat and continue to challenge. The reason why he did this was because Noah subconsciously did not want to fight to the death with Athena. That was the reason. And it turned out that Noah's idea was correct. Athena did not continue to fight on the spot, but chose to retreat. However, Athena immediately began to prepare for the battlefield again, and even summoned an entire island. One could imagine how much Athena looked forward to the battle with Noah. Under such circumstances, could Noah still avoid the battle? If he avoided the battle, how disappointed would the goddess, who was known for her beauty, be? At that moment, Noah closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Erica, Yoli, Liliana, and Hui Na, as well as Alice, all the girls present cast their eyes on Noah, waiting for Noah's decision. In the end, would Noah choose to fight Athena? Or fight Lancelot? The decision was made at this moment. After a while, Noah suddenly opened his eyes and made such a declaration. After sunset, we will fight Athena. Hearing this, Erica and Liliana smiled at the same time, knelt on one knee, and performed the most solemn night salute. Yes, sir. Yoli and Hui Na looked at each other, nodded, and turned to Noah. King. Please let us join the battle. Noah nodded, then turned to Alice. Meeting Noah's gaze, Alice opened her mouth, and just as she was about to say something, the phone in her arms rang. Alice was slightly taken aback. She smiled apologetically at Noah, picked up the phone, and looked at the screen. At the next moment, Alice's eyes widened, and she exclaimed in shock. Alexander was severely injured by Lancelot and escaped. This sentence made Noah's eyes flicker. Chapter 1463. Above the boundless sky, a bolt of lightning abruptly flew across the clear sky. It cut through the air and cut open the atmosphere. With a sharp sound, it rushed forward. With a speed comparable to that of lightning, Urek used the authority of a lightning spark to enter the world of seraphic speed. His body had also turned into lightning. He desperately whipped his body, squeezing out the remaining curse power and physical strength in his body. He gritted his teeth and didn't waste a single second of time flying. For the current Urek, time was definitely the most precious thing. Because with Urek's speed, he only needed a short second to cross a city and reach the other side of the sky. In other words, time meant distance. With just one more second, Urek could increase the distance and avoid being chased by the enemy. Although Urek had used the authority of seraphic speed, and it was reasonable to say that there were no more than 3 people in this world who could catch up to him. However, the enemy didn't belong to this category. He was an incarnation of the realm of the gods and couldn't be judged by common sense. Therefore, Urek could only whip his body desperately to escape. He didn't know how long this situation lasted. Urek only knew that when the curse power in his body that was thousands of times more powerful than the average magician's was finally exhausted, he finally couldn't hold on any longer. The speed of the lightning that was flashing in the sky slowed down bit by bit. Like a kite with a broken string, it fell down to the ground. Finally, as if a bolt of lightning had fallen from the sky, the lightning suddenly landed on the bank of a river. Bang! The lightning from the sky exploded the ground, causing bricks and gravel to fly up and sand to fill the air. After the sand and dust dissipated, Urek was lying in the hole that had been blown up by the lightning, gasping for breath. Cough! With a cough, Urek spat out a mouthful of blood. Not only that, but blood continuously flowed out from Urek's abdomen and instantly dyed the ground red. Taking a closer look, there was a bloody hole in Urek's abdomen. It even broke open Urek's back. In other words, there was a hole in Urek's abdomen that allowed one to see the scene behind him. The sharp pain seemed to come from his bone marrow, tormenting Urek's remaining consciousness. The damage to his body was very serious. The pain in his abdomen was very intense. His heart was beating like a drum. It felt like every corner of his body was breaking apart. It was unbearable. There was no doubt that Urek had received a fatal injury that could take his life in an instant. An ordinary person, even a magician with high attainments in magic, would most likely die from such a serious injury. To be able to survive such a severe injury, it was definitely not a human. Only a godly ancestor like Guinevere and the princess could survive such a serious injury. Only a godly ancestor like Guinevere and the princess could survive such a serious injury. However, Urek was a demon king that surpassed even the aforementioned existences. Although his body was that of a human, his vitality could be considered monstrous. That was what a true god-slayer was. This was also the reason why Noah, who had a large chunk of his abdomen dug out by the 3-headed dragon, was able to continue living like that. The so-called god-slayers were such a group of unnatural existences. That was why they could even kill gods. That was why they were feared by humans. Perhaps, only the legendary hero who specialized in annihilating the demon kings, the last king, would be able to deal with these foul existences. However, if this continues, no matter how tenacious my vitality is, I will still die from excessive blood loss. Now, Urek was facing such a situation. Naturally, he himself understood this the best. If he had the power of resurrection like Noah and Warban, Urek might still be able to survive. If he had the power of immortality like Tony, who could enter a state of suspended animation, Urek would be able to survive until someone came to his rescue. Unfortunately, Urek did not have that kind of power. If there was still curse power in his body, he could still use the power of a lightning spark to turn into lightning and abandon his human body to avoid death from excessive blood loss. This was one of the reasons why Yerek was able to survive until now. However, now, the cursed power in Yerek's body had been completely exhausted from the previous battle and escape. In short, Yerek could only resign himself to fate. Although he said that, Yerek endured the severe pain in his body and laughed self-deprecatingly. Although it's up to fate, in the end, I will still be saved, right? After all, Yerek was very clear. The woman who had always been against him would definitely have placed some spies around him. Therefore, that woman would definitely be the first to know about his condition and rush over. At that time, Yerek would naturally be saved. Although, if that woman saved me, I would rather die. As soon as he said this, an elegant and light voice sounded in front of Yerek. That's great, Alexander. You've finally understood how I felt in the past. Hearing this voice, Yerek breathed a sigh of relief, but at the same time, he clicked his tongue in his heart and raised his head with difficulty to look forward. In front of Yerek, the space suddenly trembled. A gush of darkness surged out of nowhere and condensed into the shape of a door. Then, from the door that seemed to be formed by a pitch-black swamp, two figures slowly walked out and came to Yerek, who was lying in a pool of blood. Hello, Alexander. Alice seemed to be friendly as she greeted him. I didn't expect that I would be able to see you in such a miserable state in my life. As expected, your good behavior is blessed by the heavens. I know that once you appear in front of me, you won't say anything nice, but I still feel very unhappy. Yerek tried his best to keep his voice from trembling and tried to be as calm and normal as usual. He then turned his gaze to the other person. It's just that I'm really surprised that you're here. Don't get me wrong. I'm not interested in admiring other people's miserable state, whether it's my own people or my enemies, Noah said faintly. I just want to know how difficult it is to deal with Lancelot in the state of the god of disobedience. Is that why you're here? Yerek laughed self-deprecatingly. Well, at least that's a convincing reason, unlike the woman beside you, whose mind is twisted. I don't want you to say that, Your Highness the Black Prince with a twisted mind, Alice said nonchalantly as if she was really admiring Yerek's miserable state. Anyway, the reason why you're so badly injured must be that you found out that Lancelot was accumulating power and was preparing to descend as the god of disobedience. In order to prevent the enemy from becoming too powerful, you thought that you had to take action at that time and take advantage of the opportunity to kill Lancelot. In the end, you were defeated by Lancelot, right? Yerek was suddenly speechless. It seems that I was right, Alice said cheerfully. But it's also true. Black Prince Yerek is a self-proclaimed god-slayer as a wise man and counselor. In order to show his rationality and to prove that he's different from others of his kind who only know how to fight, he must think that it's a stupid thing to let the enemy increase his power. But that's because of your twisted mind. TSK. Yerek smacked his lips. What makes you say that? Is it wrong to think this way? Of course it's right to think this way. The problem is what you did next, Alice said directly. Anyway, although you calculated the pros and cons clearly, because of your pride, you would never do something like a sneak attack. You must have provoked Lord Guinevere and Lancelot in front of them and started a fight, right? Yerek's mouth twitched. Obviously, Alice had hit the nail on the head again. Chapter 1464. In fact, what happened was not much different from what Alice had said. Lancelot appeared as the god of disobedience, and Yerek was almost immediately aware of it. As soon as he noticed Lancelot's abnormality, Yerek immediately rushed in his direction without any hesitation, not caring about Athena's abnormality. That was to be expected. Compared to Athena, Lancelot was undoubtedly the target that Yerek wanted to get rid of. Because of Guinevere, Yerek and Lancelot had fought many times over the years, and had already formed a lot of grudges. Naturally, with Yerek's personality, it was impossible for him to watch Lancelot's strength increase. Originally, Lancelot was only a shadow of God protecting Guinevere. If Lancelot got rid of his identity as a guardian and no longer appeared as a shadow of God, but as the god of disobedience, his strength would definitely increase by several times, and there would no longer be a problem with the duration of his appearance. In that case, Lancelot would undoubtedly become a very troublesome opponent for Eurek. There was no other reason other than the fact that the two were not compatible. As the most original god of war of steel, Lancelot's martial arts were not inferior to Luo Hao's. It was precisely because of this that Lancelot naturally mastered the mind's eye skill that could break through lightning speed. Once, in Nabali, Lancelot used the mind's eye skill to break through Yerek's lightning speed, and almost gave Yerek a fatal blow. At that time, Lancelot was still in the form of a shadow of God, and could only appear for a short period of time. Moreover, his strength was not as high as those of the highest level gods, and had a lot of limitations. If Lancelot appeared as the god of disobedience, it was only natural that his strength would increase sharply, and even the duration of his appearance would be cancelled. For Yerek, who used lightning speed as his main fighting method, it was really too disadvantageous. For this reason, Yerek naturally had to prevent Lancelot from appearing before he obtained all the strength of the god of disobedience state. Unfortunately, Lancelot's appearance had been going on for some time, and his strength had accumulated a lot. Thus, Yerek, who had brazenly entered Lancelot's territory, was met with a deadly counterattack from the pure-blooded steel hero. He was heavily injured and could only rely on his speed to escape. It was just as Alice had said. Undoubtedly, Yerek had calculated the pros and cons, but because of his own aesthetics, he disdained to use a sneak attack. In the end, under the situation where his seraphic speed authority was restrained, he was naturally counterattacked by Lancelot, whose strength had suddenly increased, and almost died. It was impossible for Yerek not to see through this in advance. It was impossible for Yerek, who had already fought Lancelot many times, not to understand that his greatest battle technique had been countered by his opponent. However, Yerek didn't choose to launch a sneak attack. Instead, he chose to challenge them head-on. Perhaps you miscalculated Lancelot's strength, but more importantly, you knew what the outcome would be, yet you still chose to fight based on your own aesthetics. That's why you ended up like this, isn't it? It was as if Alice had witnessed the entire battle with her own eyes. She spoke with fervor and assurance. Undoubtedly, you are smart, but you insist on some stupid principles in some unnecessary places. That is proof of your twisted mind, Alexander. You really are a god-slayer. Don't talk to me as if you know me very well. I'm not that close to you. Yerek couldn't help but feel a little agitated because his sore spot had been poked. In the end, he forgot that he still had a fatal injury, which caused his chest to tighten, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Seeing this, Alice laughed. You can still speak so agitatedly even after suffering such a serious injury. It seems that you are fine. Indeed, you are worthy of being called the Demon King. Yerek could only close his eyes. Out of sight, out of mind. It seemed that being reduced to such a miserable state in front of his enemy really made Yerek feel extremely aggrieved. On the other hand, Alice was very happy. I finally returned the favor here, Alexander. After this time, I don't owe you anything. Although Alice and Yerek were enemies, they didn't have a grudge against each other. Instead, it was because of their positions that were hostile to other parties that led to this situation. In other words, they were the so-called political enemies. And since it was due to political hostility, it would never be mixed with personal feelings. For example, in the situation of dealing with Guinevere, Alice and Yerek had the same position and interests, so the two had cooperated many times. Because of this, Alice had been saved by Yerek once in the past. At that time, Alice's feelings were probably similar to Yerek's now. Seeing Alice continue to mock Yerek with a happy face, Noah couldn't help but shake his head. He stepped forward, took out a bottle of potion from his arms, opened the bottle, and poured it directly into Yarek's penetrated abdomen. Clang! The potion that was poured into Yarek's penetrated back immediately evaporated into a mist. It covered Yarek's body like a soft fluorescent light, emitting light. Under the illumination of the light, the wounds on Yarek's body that directly penetrated the front and back of his body began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Yarek only felt that the severe pain in his abdomen began to disappear little by little, and the lack of physical strength in his body began to recover little by little, which surprised him a little. Chapter 1465. After that, Noah shared some information with Yarek and learned about Lancelot's current situation. At present, Lancelot had appeared in the state of the god of disobedience, but his power had not increased to the extent that he should have. After years of guarding Guinevere, Lancelot had already adapted to the state of the shadow of God. Now that he had suddenly turned into the body of disobedience, his power could not be increased to the peak at once. It needed to be accumulated bit by bit. According to Yarek, Lancelot had now accumulated a considerable amount of power. Yarek had miscalculated Lancelot's current power, which was why he was seriously injured. If this continued, it would not take long for Lancelot's power to recover to the peak of the state of the god of disobedience, and he would become a powerful enemy no weaker than the great sage. For this reason, Yarek said that he had to keep an eye on Lancelot and see if he could find an opportunity to attack him. Noah naturally had no objections, but he gave Yarek a request. "No matter what, I will fight with Athena tonight," Noah said to Yarek. "At that time, whether you can find an opportunity to attack Lancelot or not, if Lancelot intends to intervene in the battle between me and Athena, you must stop him." "Tonight?" Yarek looked at Noah meaningfully and curled his lips into a smile. "You really are a god-slayer." This remark came out of nowhere. However, anyone who understood the reason behind it would understand why Yarek said this. Noah naturally understood why Yarek said this, and he retorted, not to be outdone. "Do you have the right to say this to me?" Yarek wanted to refute Noah's words, but when he glanced at Alice's eager expression, he immediately shut his mouth. Presumably, if Yarek refuted, Alice would use Yarek's serious injury as an excuse to fight back on behalf of Noah. Understanding this point, although Yarek was very unhappy, he didn't want to ask for a snub, so he immediately said to Noah, "I can keep an eye on Lancelot, but I can't guarantee that the short-sighted god ancestor won't have other ideas. Since Guinevere didn't hesitate to let Lancelot show up, it means that the last king Guinevere has been looking for is very likely to be nearby. That guy will definitely do something. You decide what to do." True enough. Just as Alice had said, Yarek finally noticed the last king. Moreover, Yarek had given such an explanation. The hero who is destined to annihilate the demon king. Now that there are already 7 god-slayers in the world, is it a certainty that he will awaken again? Or is it something that can be stopped? The only people who will bear witness to this outcome will probably be you and me. If it can be stopped, then I don't mind giving him a hand. But if it is inevitable, then presumably, at the same time, the person who will bear witness to this outcome and become the first sacrifice under the hero's sword is also likely to appear between you and me. After leaving these words, Yarek released the power of speed, turned into a flash of lightning, and disappeared on the other side of the sky. After that, Alice said that when she returned to the hotel, she would use her avatar to keep an eye on Yarek. According to what the princess said, she seemed to think that Yarek would do something. Indeed, under the circumstances of having a common enemy and common interests, the Black Prince Yarek is a trustworthy partner. But that psychologically twisted guy also has a side that will not hesitate to give up if he thinks that the plan will fail. He is simply too evil. If we don't keep an eye on him, who knows if he will suddenly retreat at the critical moment and leave the mess for us to clean up. In view of this, Alice loudly advocated that they must keep an eye on the Black Prince Yarek. Indeed, there was a possibility that Yerek would suddenly put his own safety first and escape like a cicada. Otherwise, after being severely injured by Lancelot, the Black Prince would not have escaped so quickly. Once he saw that the situation was unfavorable, this guy would definitely suddenly withdraw. To put it nicely, it would be a wise choice. To put it bluntly, it would be adding insult to injury. In short, Alice believed that they still needed to keep an eye on Yerek. Although, Noah thought that rather than saying that Alice intended to spy on Yerek, it was better to say that she intended to keep mentioning in Yerek's ear that he saved her, so as to give this guy a blow and amuse him. But it had to be said that Alice's suggestion was also correct. Therefore, Noah did not object. Neither Noah nor Alice noticed. Unknowingly, the two acted together as if it was a matter of course, without any consideration at all. Just like this, Noah and Alice passed through the portal and returned to the hotel. And as soon as they returned to the hotel, Noah discovered it. Erica and Liliana, who were chatting with Yoli and Hui Na, immediately looked at Noah with a strange expression when they saw him return. Seeing this, for some reason, Noah suddenly had an ominous feeling in his heart. Then, Erica and Liliana both spoke. Although I know that you are more unreasonable than the other Godslayers, I didn't expect you to be this unreasonable. Erica used sarcastic words to mock Noah. However, as your follower, let me congratulate you a little. Our king, you have accomplished another feat that the other Godslayers could not. I thought you must be much more rational than the other Godslayers, but sure enough, you are also an unreasonable king. Liliana, on the other hand, stared at Noah with eyes that seemed to be filled with anger and sadness, but more than that, it was as if she had been betrayed. I was wrong about you, Noah Doria. Seeing that both Erica and Liliana were angry, the corner of Noah's eyes twitched. He could not help but look at Yoli and Hui Na. Sensing Noah's gaze, Hui Na did not know why, but she turned her head away with some embarrassment. As for Yoli, her pretty face turned red as she stammered. Actually, Mr. Gandu just called me and said that someone left a message for the king and sent it to my phone. After saying that, Yoli operated the phone and played the language. The next moment, a rather familiar voice sounded from Yoli's phone. Grandmaster, disciple Lu Yinghua has already announced the news of Grandmaster taking my master as a concubine to the world under master's orders. I believe that Grandmaster's name will spread all over the world in a few days to strengthen Grandmaster's reputation. Noah's face froze. Also, Disciple heard that there seems to be another troublesome opponent on Grandmaster's side, so I reported this to Master. Lu Yinghua's voice was still playing. Master asked Disciple to tell Grandmaster that Luo Tsuelian is now a married woman. Although she can't show her face in public, she still has the responsibility of assisting her husband and teaching her children. She should be by her husband's side when he is in trouble. However, Luo Tsuelian's husband is an unparalleled king. He can overcome these small tribulations with his unparalleled strength. There is no need for a woman to tell him what to do. Therefore, Master will continue to live deep in Mount Lu and wait for Grandmaster's triumphant return. After saying that, Lu Yinghua's voice disappeared from Yoli's phone. The whole place fell into a dead silence. Alice couldn't help but mutter. Although I knew that this news couldn't be hidden sooner or later, I didn't expect it to be so soon. The corner of Noah's mouth twitched uncontrollably. He had no idea what to say. Looking at Noah, Liliana still looked as if she had been betrayed. Erica glanced at Noah and said with a faint smile. Even sect leader Luo Hao can be taken as a concubine. As expected of our king. Therefore, as your knight, I hope you can explain the process to us clearly. You must let us understand how powerful our king is. At this moment, Noah only felt that. Perhaps, this would be an even more difficult calamity to overcome than the duel with Athena. Who knows? Chapter 1466. No matter how many twists and turns there were, time would not stop just because of that. Under all kinds of circumstances, the sky gradually darkened. Noah walked out of the hotel alone and stood in front of the door. He looked up at the starry sky and fell into silence. Lancelot was probably still accumulating power, right? Yerek, on the other hand, was definitely not going to act rashly. He was hiding in the dark and keeping an eye on the original hero of steel. Alice was lying in a room in the hotel at this moment. She had used a spirit clone and sent it to keep an eye on Yerek. Of the remaining people, Erica, Yoli, Liliana, and Hui were preparing to set off. They were adjusting themselves so that their bodies could exert 100% of their strength. In other words, Noah was the only one who had nothing to do at the moment. However, Noah was not to be blamed for that. For a God-slayer, there was no need for him to adjust his state of mind. No matter how bad their condition was or how rusty their body was, once they wanted to fight from the bottom of their heart, their body would be stimulated with hormones stronger than adrenaline, allowing their body and mind to enter the best condition for battle in an instant. Therefore, for a God-slayer, adjusting one's condition was completely unnecessary. That was because a God-slayer was an existence that was born for battle. If an athlete did not persist in training, their physical strength would gradually decline, and their limbs would gradually become sluggish. Even if they persisted in training, once they reached a certain age, their physical condition would continue to deteriorate until they were only slightly stronger than the average person. However, a God-slayer did not have this problem at all. It didn't matter how many years it had been since he had trained, or even if he hadn't done any sports, or even if he had completely forgotten how to fight. As long as they focused, raised their fighting spirit, and entered a state of battle, the God-slayer's body and mind would immediately be adjusted to the perfect condition. They would never become weaker than before. The so-called God-slayers were a group of beings that broke the rules. They would only become stronger and stronger. There was no reason for them to become weaker. Moreover, as long as they could fight, they would naturally become stronger even if they did not train, exercise, or learn. Therefore, the God-slayers were monsters that were born for battle. Therefore, even the gods had no choice but to be wary of these demon kings. They chose a brave one to be in charge of annihilating these foul existences. As one of the God-slayers, Noah's true power had long since surpassed that of the average God-slayer, reaching an unprecedented level of power. Coupled with the God-slayer's monstrous characteristics, it was no wonder that Noah was breaking more and more rules. Of course, these transgressions were merely the characteristics of the God-slayer and could not be considered his strength. The true power of the God-slayer lay in one thing. Power. It was the power of the gods that had been forcibly seized from the gods in the heavens. Only when they had the right to use it could a God-slayer be a match for the gods, surpassing the humans and reaching the realm of true God-slayer. Therefore, authority was undoubtedly the true trump card of the God-slayers. The rest of the God-slayers were the same. Noah was the same. Noah reached out a hand and pressed it against his chest. He closed his eyes and immersed himself in the depths of his heart. There was a universe filled with nebulas. In the center of the universe, there was a stone plate with 10 connected patterns. On the surface, there was a sun with the imprint of a lion and a dragon. This stone plate was now in a deep slumber, giving off a lifeless feeling. Because the time to use it had yet to come. However, he only needed to wait until dawn, and the stone plate would regain its vitality. At that time, Noah would be able to use his trump card power. Yes. As long as he waited until dawn, Noah's adaptation period would be over. At that time, Noah would be able to use the power of the oldest demon king with 3 digits, known as Az-Dakaha of the final trial of mankind, and even surpass him in power. With that level of power, he would not even need a minute to deal with Athena. After all, Athena's power, in the box, was at most 4 digits. It was a piece of cake for a 3-digit number of people to deal with a 4-digit number of people. However, Noah did not have such thoughts. It was not that Noah did not respect Athena and felt that he did not need to use his full power against her. It was also not that Noah underestimated himself and felt that Athena's power was not enough for him to use his full power. Instead, Noah's intuition told him that after dawn, the battle with Athena might not be able to be carried out. Noah didn't know why, but he had such a feeling. So, tonight is the night. Noah opened his eyes and looked at the night sky again. Tonight is the only chance for me to end things with Athena. Because of this, even if he could use his power at dawn, Noah still could not choose to wait. Tonight was the night to put an end to it. Just as Noah silently made up his mind, a few figures slowly walked out of the hotel door. Sensing the aura behind him, Noah turned around and looked in the direction of the hotel door. There, Erica, Yoli, Liliana, and Hui Na stood side by side, all looking at Noah. At this moment, there was no fear in the eyes of the four young girls. Even if they knew that they were about to face a god that humans could not reach, the four girls did not show the slightest fear. No. Perhaps, in the hearts of the girls, there was still a fear that Noah could not detect. But even so, the girls still chose to overcome their fear and move forward bravely. Erica and Liliana were determined to fight to the end as Noah's knights. Yoli and Hui Na were determined to protect this land as Witch Yuan. For this, the four girls would follow Noah and challenge the gods. Knowing the determination of the four girls, Noah wouldn't say anything that didn't look at the atmosphere. Under such circumstances, Noah only smiled, turned around, and looked forward. Let's go. Hearing this, Erica, Yoli, Liliana, and Hui Na all nodded slowly, their eyes surging with high fighting spirit. Crash! Amidst the clear sound of the waves crashed against the edge of the small island made of rocks before slowly retreating. It was an extremely dark place. In the night sky, there was no full moon, no stars, and no trace of light. In this night sky that completely eliminated all light sources, leaving only darkness, the rocky island was like the back of a giant man-eating beast, making people tremble with fear. At a certain moment, a dim light suddenly flashed from the edge of the sky, sweeping over like a meteor. The meteor-like dim light streaked across the sky and finally fell on the chilling rocky island, setting off a whirlwind. Then, the dim light gradually dimmed, exposing the scene inside to the air. It was Noah and his group. Liliana used the witch's flight spell to bring everyone to the rocky island. As soon as they entered the rocky island, except for Noah, the vision of the four girls was completely blocked. It was not a mysterious effect, but simply because it was too dark, their vision could not capture anything at all. Noah had once absorbed the protozoan virus that could provide night vision, so he could see everything clearly at night. However, the girls were only ordinary humans and did not have night vision. However, the girls chose to use magic and incantations to make up for the lack of night vision. Light, please reside in our eyes, yin and yang, heaven and earth, light and darkness, advance and retreat. Erica and Liliana chanted night vision magic, while Yoli and Hui Na also used incantations to increase their vision. In this way, the surrounding environment was suddenly revealed to all the girls. However, it was precisely because of this that the next moment, the hearts of the girls suddenly jumped violently. Chapter 1467. In the dark moonlit night, on the small island that was filled with a terrifying atmosphere, creepy statues filled the surroundings of Noah's group. They were all petrified humanoid statues. Some of the people in the statues were wearing tattered cloth clothes, some were wearing armor, some were fully armed, and some were lightly armed. But without exception, all of them were carrying weapons, and the muscles on their bodies were bulging. Their physiques were strong, and they seemed to have an unusual sense of oppression. However, the four girls, Erica, Yoli, Liliana, and Hui Na, couldn't help but gasp when they saw the expressions on the statues. They were all muscular and armed, and it was clear that they weren't ordinary people at first glance. What kind of expression was that? Fear. Wailing. Horror. Despair. The expressions and performances of the human-shaped statues perfectly displayed these emotions. They were extremely vivid, as if they were real people. And if they were real people, then what did these people experience before they were petrified to show such expressions and performances? No one, including Noah, could imagine. There was only one thing that was certain. That was, if these stone statues were real people, then they must have seen hell before they were petrified. The stone statues on the Serpent Island. Erica couldn't help but murmur. It's just like the Invisible Island. The Invisible Island. In Greek mythology, the island where the Medusa, the Gorgon, resided. In Greek mythology, Medusa, who was originally a goddess but was cursed by Athena and degenerated into a monster, lived on the island called the Invisible Island. Together with her two sisters, they were known as the Gorgon sisters. When they were still in the world of the form moon, Medusa, who was Noah's servant, said that no matter what era it was, there was never a lack of heroes who wanted to defeat monsters and become famous. Therefore, humans who were confident in their own abilities and wanted to become heroes continuously went to the Invisible Island to challenge the banshee living on the island. However, in the end, the dreams of these humans were cruelly shattered one after another. Their foolish challenge ended with them being turned into stone one by the snake-haired demoness known as Medusa. Now, Athena was on this island. On this island, there were countless stone statues of people who were clearly warriors. This scene was like a reenactment of the scene on the Invisible Island. I see. Liliana said with mixed feelings. Did that goddess choose to face her destined enemy in such a manner? No matter what era it was, there was never a lack of humans who wanted to defeat monsters and make a name for themselves. However, they ended up becoming sacrificial lambs because they overestimated themselves. But at the same time, no matter which era it was, the final outcome of the monsters was to be suppressed by the true heroes and become the souls of the dead under the heroes' swords. Athena was also a Medusa. That was why Athena chose to recreate the Invisible Island that once welcomed the human warriors as Medusa. The meaning behind it was to express his determination. Should they preserve their past glory and turn the challengers into stone statues and take them to their deaths? Or should they lose in the end and be suppressed by the true heroes and become the stepping stone of the true heroes' fame? Athena was looking forward to one of the two outcomes. This reminded Noah of Azrael-Dakaha. The evil god of the fire worship sect, who was known as the final trial of humans, had once roared at Noah in such a manner. I am the absolute evil. What lies above my corpse is justice that was right. Since Azrael-Dakaha was the absolute evil, then wouldn't the human hero who defeated the demonic dragon represent the absolute righteousness? The core of the fire worship sect was the dualism of good and evil. However, the existence of evil was only to highlight the importance of good. After all, only when evil existed in this world, humans who fought against it would become the true absolute righteousness. Without the existence of evil, the existence of good would also become dispensable. Just like how humans would only seek the light in the dark. Only when evil existed, humans would sincerely seek the absolute righteousness. The three-headed demonic dragon of the fire worship sect defined its existence as the absolute evil. It would not compromise with humans and spread despair and hell in the name of the final trial of mankind so that true absolute righteousness would never disappear from the world. That was the meaning of the existence of evil in the fire worship sect. Heroes would only be born in troubled times. Only in the darkness would light come. Righteousness would only appear in evil. Only in despair would there be hope. It was just like how Noah was disappointed by the hatred of the humans in the world of the Black Bullet and chose to give up on saving the humans. In the end, he saw the only hope of the humans in despair. Now, Athena recreated the island of the snake demon and the legacy of the myth to express her resolve. She would not compromise with the humans. Only by defeating her could one become a true hero. However, this resolve was not directed at the entire human race. This time, Athena recreated the legend of the invisible island for one person. That person was Noah. It was not a challenge to the entire human race but a duel with one person. Here, the goddess named Athena displayed an awareness and spirit that was definitely not inferior to the final trial of mankind. Understanding this, Noah's entire body began to heat up, and an explosive force surged out of his back. At this time, Noah finally ignited his true fighting spirit. In order to live up to Athena's expectations. At this time, the silence was broken. Crack, without any reason, a cracking sound was suddenly heard. Noah and the others' expressions froze as they turned their heads and looked at the source of the sound. There was a stone statue there. However, a crack suddenly appeared on the stone statue. This immediately caused a chain reaction. Crack, 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 crack. Around the group of people, the stone statues suddenly cracked without any warning and were full of cracks. At the same time, a powerful spell power fluctuated from the stone statues and spread to the surroundings. Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na took out their weapons without hesitation. With a leap, they surrounded Noah and Yoli in a triangular formation and were on guard. Almost at the same time, the cracking sound came to an abrupt end. Boom! A stone statue suddenly exploded, sending stone fragments all over the sky. Boom, 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 boom. Accompanied by the sound of explosions, the stone statues exploded one after another, raising a burst of dust. Soon after, numerous figures slowly appeared from the dust that filled the entire space. Aw! Yoli couldn't help but let out a small cry of surprise. Not only Yoli, but even Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na couldn't help but tighten their grip on their weapons. Noah furrowed his brows and scanned the surroundings sharply. From the dust, people appeared one after another. They were all stone statues before, but now they had turned into normal human warriors. However, none of these warriors had pupils. Their eyes were all sinister white, and their skin was shriveled. Their bodies swayed as they stood, like dried corpses. Noah had seen the same scene before. In the battle with Warban used the power of the Servant of Death to summon the dead to fight for him. They were in such a state. Be careful! Erica couldn't help but shout. Athena is also the god of the underworld. She can bestow death to humans and manipulate the dead. These people are most likely the human warriors who were summoned by Athena and petrified by the snake-haired demoness Medusa. They failed to challenge the snake-haired demoness. As soon as he finished speaking, the dead surrounding the group of people suddenly raised their heads, and their shaky bodies suddenly stabilized. The next moment, the dead rushed over one by one. Noah clenched his fists tightly as he watched the undead charging at him one after another with weapons in their hands like frenzied beasts. Chapter 1468. Heart of the Lion King, show the essence of the struggle in my hands, my wings, become the steel of the phantom blade. Silver Master Craftsman, bestow upon me strength, Gwawen, Taboo Duck, Long Words Mother, Silk Flute Cowards. When the hordes of the dead charged toward Noah's group, Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na chanted incantations at once, instilling the spell power in their bodies into the weapons in their hands. The group of undead charging at the front immediately howled and pounced at Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na. They mercilessly swung their rusty weapons at the three girls. Undoubtedly, the weapons were covered in rust and looked like they couldn't even cut through a piece of cloth. However, they easily tore through the air, stirring up sonic booms, and slashed down heavily at the three slender girls as though they wanted to cut them in half. Clang! Along with the neat sound of metal clashing, the weapons in the hands of the dead at the front were all blocked by the weapons in Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na's hands, stirring up a burst of sparks. Og! At that moment, the three girls let out soft groans one after another. Although they successfully blocked the attacks of the dead, the weapons in front of Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na each rubbed fiercely against at least 3 or 4 rusty weapons, enduring the simultaneous attacks of 3 or 4 dead. As a result, Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na each had to deal with at least 3 or 4 dead, bearing a great impact. Under such circumstances, the group of dead armed with weapons continued to charge in the direction of the group. Their ferocious eyes without pupils bloomed with a ferocious glint that represented madness. If the dead charged over and launched attacks, Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na definitely wouldn't be able to stop them this time. Hui Na immediately used the God Descend spell without any hesitation. O divine wind, cleansing rain. Taking Susanu's divine power into her body and summoning the authority of the storm god, Hui Na's whole body burst into a whirlwind, and she shook it away. Dong! With a loud roar, the charging dead were all blown away by the storm, one by one, and they were all sent flying backward. Seeing this, Liliana's eyes turned cold and she stabbed the Grand Master's silver craftsman's sword into the ground. Mother who gives and takes life, give me the landmarks of the dark land. Ripples of curse power spread out from the center of the Grand Master silversmith, creating ripples on the ground. Wherever the invisible ripples passed, the ground would instantly soften and turn into a swamp. The corpses that were blown away by the storm struggled to get up, but the ground suddenly turned into a swamp and swallowed their bodies, causing them to sink into the ground one after another. Not letting go of this opportunity, Erica threw the Lion King's heart into the sky. Mission to the Steel Lion. Tear, pierce, bite, defeat, annihilate, and victory. I entrust you to this battlefield. The Lion King's heart that was thrown high suddenly trembled, then suddenly began to distort. The distorted Lion King's heart began to expand like a ball of light and gradually gathered into a ball. Finally, it turned into a steel lion that fell from the sky and landed on the ground. Roar! The steel lions roared and pounced on the corpses that had sunk into the swamp-like ground. The dead man who was trapped in the swamp swung his rusty weapon at the lion that was pouncing on him. The steel lions directly bit the rusty weapons with their sharp teeth and swung their sharp claws, trying to tear the corpses that were trapped. As a result, the steel lions and the corpses that were trapped in the swamp began to fight, causing roars and roars to resound over the entire island. The group of corpses and the steel lions fought each other, and for a moment, they fell into a stalemate. However, the stalemate was destined to only last for a while. This was because in the surrounding forest, swaying silhouettes began to appear one after another, slowly making their way towards this place. There was no doubt that those black figures were also the souls of the deceased that Athena had awakened. When they all joined the battle, the situation would definitely take a turn for the worse. After all, those corpses were all human warriors who were confident in their abilities when they were alive and dared to go to the invisible island to challenge the snake-haired demon Medusa. Even though they were now dead, had lost their minds, and had lost their abilities, there were still many of them. With the strength of Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na, it wasn't that easy to stop the group of corpses. For this reason, Yoli kept concentrating, closing her eyes, praying, and activating the curse power in her body in an attempt to obtain spirit vision and see the weaknesses of the group of corpses. Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na were still in a triangular formation, protecting Noah and Yoli in the middle. One was controlling the steel lions to fight a group battle. One was manipulating the earth to trap the group of corpses. The remaining one was constantly waving a storm, blowing away the approaching corpses. The group of girls grasped their tasks well one by one, and only then did they manage to block the group of corpses. Noah, who was protected by Erica, Liliana, and Hui Na in the middle, looked at the stalemate situation. His brows furrowed deeper and deeper, and he couldn't help but feel a little impatient. Perhaps seeing through the anxiety in Noah's heart, Erica spoke to Noah while controlling the steel lions. Go and look for Athena. Leave this to us. Hearing this, Noah was slightly startled. After hesitating for a moment, he asked with uncertainty. Can you do it? Erica? A fierce and confident smile like a lioness appeared on Erica's face. Who do you think I am? Go. Your Majesty. Liliana said with a stern face. We will definitely bring you victory. If it's against a god, Huina has no confidence, but it's just some undead. Let's see how Huina exorcises them. Huina said in a cheerful tone while rolling up a storm. Your Majesty's opponent should be a god that even Huina and the others can't deal with. Leave these undead to Huina and the others. After saying that, Erica, Liliana and Huina all revealed determined and confident looks. Gazing at the slender but reliable backs of the three girls, Noah took a deep breath and made a decision in his heart. With a flip of his hand, a rather gorgeous scabbard appeared in Noah's hand. 1,000-Mile Valley. Noah stuffed the scabbard in his hand into Yoli's arms. This scabbard has the power to protect and heal you. I've stored enough spell power in it. I'll leave it to you for safekeeping. Use it properly. Yoli was stunned for a moment, but then he nodded with a serious face. I understand. After Yoli took the scabbard, Noah took out 4 bottles of potions filled with blue liquid and stuffed them into the palms of the 4 girls. This is a spiritual medicine that can quickly restore spell power. Drink it and no matter how you use spells for at least an hour, you won't have to worry about running out of spell power. Hearing Noah's words, Liliana couldn't help but be a little surprised. There's actually such a spiritual medicine? What a powerful support. Erica held the potion in her hand tightly and smiled sweetly. This way, Erica Brantley will transform into a more valiant knight than a paladin. She can use cavalry without any scruples. Huina too. With the scabbard in Yoli's hand that can heal the body, Huina can use invite God to descend without any scruples, Huina said loudly. So, Your Majesty, you can rest assured. Noah nodded heavily. Chapter 1469. Tap. 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 Tap, clear footsteps echoed rhythmically in the surrounding space. Noah walked in at a leisurely pace. This place was a ruin. It looked like a luxurious palace. The surrounding walls were covered with vines and thorns. Numerous stone pillars stood in the spacious hall. They were engraved with snake-shaped patterns. It was as if there were extremely nimble snakes coiling around the pillars. They exuded an extremely ancient aura. It was the aura of snakes. It was like sticky blood, but also like a pungent fishy smell. It did not bring any discomfort, but instead, it gave off a sacred aura. While feeling the aura, Noah slowly walked forward. Noah raised his eyes and looked forward. An ancient wall that was also branded with snake-shaped patterns appeared there. In front of the wall, there was a throne. The Snake Queen, known for her beauty and wisdom, was sitting on the throne. She was still wearing the same ancient Greek-style dress. His entire body was rippling with divine power visible to the naked eye, like waves of air. Athena opened her eyes and looked at Noah with her snake-like, owl-like eyes. In that pair of indescribable charming eyes, a coquettish light shone brightly in the pitch-black moonlit night. Noah's and Athena's gazes finally met. Athena stared into Noah's deep, dark eyes as if she had tasted an intoxicating wine, and she spoke with satisfaction. Your eyes are full of fighting spirit and very high. It's completely different from the last time. My efforts were not in vain. Athena's words made Noah squint his eyes. I see. You saw that I didn't want to fight you last time. Of course, my eyes are not so muddy that I can't see whether a warrior has the will to fight or not, Athena said proudly. This concubine is the god of war, and also the goddess of unparalleled wisdom. This concubine only needs a single glance to see whether this concubine's destined enemy wants to fight or not. That was why Athena did not fight with Noah immediately. Instead, she summoned the mythological beast in an attempt to stimulate Noah's fighting spirit. However, Noah used the mythological beast summoned by Athena to let Electra, Uri, Liliana, and Huina win one battle, provoking Athena's self-esteem and forcing her to leave. In other words, the battle between Noah and Athena had actually started from the beginning. However, it was not in the form of martial arts, but in the form of intelligence. For me, the goddess of wisdom, to compete with intelligence is not a bad thing, but it is just for fun. It can't quell the surging passion in my heart. Athena, who was sitting on the throne, stared intently at Noah, her snake eyes emitting scorching emotions. As expected, the battle with you must be decided by martial arts. Therefore, I am not unhappy about your perfunctory attitude last time, but I am not satisfied either. Do you understand? Hearing this, Noah fell silent. After a while, Noah smiled helplessly. Goddess, famous for your beauty and wisdom, have you never thought about why I don't want to fight with you? There are many reasons why humans don't want to fight, but in the end, it's because they don't have enough awareness. Athena looked straight at Noah. My destined enemy, isn't the reason why you don't want to fight not because you don't have enough awareness? If you want to say that I don't have enough awareness, I guess you can say that, right? Noah shrugged and met Athena's gaze. After all, I won't want to fight to the death with someone I like for no reason. Athena was taken aback by his words. Under Athena's startled expression, Noah continued as if he was talking to himself. Although I have an ill-fated relationship with you, and I am extremely disgusted by your values of treating humans as trash, that is a characteristic of the gods of disobedience. Therefore, apart from this, I do have an extraordinary good impression of the goddess named Athena. Who would ignite their fighting spirit for no reason at all towards the person they have a good impression of? The scene suddenly fell into an indescribable silence. Athena stared straight at Noah, her snake eyes flashing slightly, as if she wanted to see through Noah's true thoughts and expose his lies. However, Noah didn't avoid Athena's gaze. Instead, he walked up to her and stared back at her. Looking at Noah's deep eyes that were as calm as the night sky, Athena suddenly laughed. And it was the kind of laughter that would cause her to convulse with laughter. In other words, you are my fated enemy. Do you have feelings for me? Athena said to Noah with a joyful smile. You actually dare to court the queen of the gods, goddess Athena. There should be a limit to your arrogance. But thinking about it, perhaps it wouldn't be too much to describe the ill-fated relationship between you and me as love. However, you are my fated enemy. I am the queen of the divine realm, the supreme goddess of wisdom, and the eternal virgin goddess. Athena narrowed her snake eyes. Even the gods are unable to win the love of the eternal virgin goddess. Although you are the demon king who killed the gods, you are just a mere human. Do you have the magnanimity to bear the love of Athena? What about you? Haven't you always claimed that you want to take me as your possession? Noah curled his lips into a smile, but his dark and deep eyes gradually burned with a bright light. Does the queen of the divine realm, the Trinity, have the ability to bear my love? Noah's words made Athena laugh again, but her snake eyes were burning with an astonishing fighting spirit just like Noah's. That's why I said, there should be a limit to your arrogance. Athena is the eternal virgin goddess, and the love of a mortal is just a pile of rubble by the roadside. There is no need to pay attention to it. Athena slowly stood up, her eyes never leaving Noah. However, I am the queen of the divine realm. Even if you are my fated enemy, doubting the queen's ability is a great disrespect. Let me properly prove whether or not Athena has the ability to make you the goddess' possession. A terrifying amount of curse power surged out from Athena's body. Athena will use all her strength to crusade against the goddess-fated enemy. Noah Doria, prove your magnanimity to me, the eternal virgin goddess. The surging curse power fluctuated in this space, causing the air to freeze, the ground to tremble, and the night to tremble. At this time, the strength of the curse power surging from Athena's body had already surpassed that of the great sage. The night is my domain, and this island is the mythical place where my snake nature reappears. In this night, in this mythical place, my power will rise to the highest peak in history. Athena carried an astonishing aura that seemed to compress the whole world into her slender body, and she revealed a rather sinister smile at Noah. You are about to face an unprecedentedly powerful goddess, Noah Doria. Under such circumstances, do you still have the guts to woo Athena? Listening to Athena's seemingly joyful and provocative words, feeling the astonishing and terrifying aura, Noah suddenly smiled. Why do you think I chose to come here at night to settle things with you? At night, Athena's power would increase significantly. It was precisely because he understood this that Noah chose to come here at night. Knowing that Athena's power would increase during this period of time, he still chose this time to settle things. This was why Yerek claimed that Noah was indeed a godslayer. Only a godslayer would do such a reckless thing in order to satisfy his desire for a battle. However, Noah did not do this to satisfy his desire for battle. I only have one reason for doing this. Noah's entire body surged with terrifying curse power. It is to completely defeat you. Chapter 1470. Wang. In the dark temple, two extremely violent curses shook and swept out like a storm. As if fighting for the ownership of space, they collided and squeezed each other, causing the space to tremble and shake. Noah and Athena's eyes met, and their eyes burned with an astonishing fighting spirit. Although they called each other fated and ill-fated, in fact, if one really wanted to count, this should be the first time Noah and Athena had a battle to the death. When they first met, Athena had not yet recovered her identity as the queen of the divine realm, and Noah had just obtained his authority and become a god-slayer. Both of them were not mature. At that time, although Noah and Athena had a short confrontation, it was indeed quite short. They did not even exchange a single move, so it could not be considered a battle at all. Therefore, this was the first time Noah and Athena had a real battle in the truest sense. However, the fighting spirit in their hearts were unusually high. Gazing at Athena, who was standing in front of the throne, wearing an ancient Greek-style dress that swayed back and forth under the huge waves of curses, Noah's mind moved. In his body, the energy source that was filled with boundless energy suddenly turned into a source of divine might. The divine might energy surged towards Noah's limbs like a torrential stream. Athena was not only the goddess of the earth, but also the goddess of darkness who dominated the underworld, and the goddess of wisdom who controlled the wisdom of the heavens. Because she was always accompanied by these three attributes, Athena was the goddess of the Trinity. Now, under the night, Athena's divinity as the goddess of darkness had greatly increased, and on this invisible island, the earth attribute, which symbolized the snake, had also greatly increased. In this case, the miraculous effect of the demon slayer to break the power of curses would certainly greatly reduce the threat of the goddess of earth and darkness. After all, the demon slayer could even kill demon king Solomon, who had the power of the dark elf king who could control the elements of darkness. Its holy characteristics were undoubtedly the most lethal weapon for the goddess of death and darkness. The godhead that represented the Athena serpent was Medusa. The evil eye of this demoness could turn everything in her sight into stone. Even the godslayer's curse resistance could not completely block it. However, if it was the curse-breaking power of the demon slayer, it would definitely be able to break the petrification curse. In addition, Noah's ultimate sword skill was a combination of sword skills and divine power. Without divine power and the fairy device, its true power could not be unleashed. Therefore, when the battle was on the verge of breaking out, Noah did not hesitate to transform the energy in his body into the source of divine power, and use the weapon refinement magic. Clank! A dazzling white light blossomed from Noah's hand, converging into the shape of a sword. The silver holy sword flashed in the dazzling light, and fell into Noah's hand. A large amount of divine power was immediately poured into the demon slayer, causing a dazzling white light to shine, dispelling the surrounding darkness and illuminating the entire space. Oh! What an unpleasant light! Athena frowned her beautiful eyebrows, but then smiled pleasantly. However, if it's not to this extent, then it won't be interesting. As soon as she finished speaking, Athena's figure suddenly turned into a dark shadow, and like a materialized darkness, she swept toward Noah. A dense darkness appeared in Athena's hand, and converged into a huge side that fell into Athena's hand. Let me see if your light is stronger, or if my darkness is stronger. After saying this, Athena, who had turned into a shadow, shot in front of Noah. The pitch-black scythe in her hand cut through the air, like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, drawing a perfect arc, and heavily chopped towards Noah's throat. Noah, who had long been prepared for battle, tightened his grip on the silver holy sword, and the divine power in his body surged. His footsteps slightly slowed, and then his whole body turned into a bolt of lightning, violently rushing out. Absolute Sword Technique. Initial form Purple Lightning. The Purple Lightning sword skill was one of the most commonly used absolute sword skills. This was because the average person would not be able to deal with the thrusts that were as fast as lightning. As long as there was a slight delay in reaction, the user of this absolute sword technique would be in an invincible position. Once, Versilia was instantly defeated by Renasubel's Purple Lightning, and her mind was distorted because of it. In other words, if one could not even withstand the initial form of the absolute sword technique, then the opponent was not qualified to make the user of the absolute sword technique use her full strength. Therefore, the user of the absolute sword technique would usually use the initial form of the Purple Lightning. Noah was the same. Thus, a strike comparable to lightning directly swept out, violently stabbing the pitch-black side that was chopping towards him. Clang! In the sound of a bell, the holy sword and the black scythe suddenly collided, setting off a circle of strong wind, sweeping out. Then, with the sound of water being poured on fire, in Noah's hand, a dazzling white light flashed from the silver holy sword on the black scythe, expelling the fog that was surging on it, dispersing it. Seeing this, Athena bit her lips and was speechless. Sure enough, it is an unpleasant light. Hearing this, Noah laughed. The best part is yet to come. After saying this, Noah's body suddenly spun, and the holy sword in his hand was like a full moon, flashing through space. Absolute Sword Technique. Form 3 Shadow Moon Dance. The holy sword flashing white light immediately turned into a ray of moonlight, with a cold but fatal arc, fiercely slashing towards Athena's delicate body. This slash first cut the surrounding darkness, and then as fast as the moonlight, it slashed towards Athena's direction, giving the illusion that a full moon suddenly appeared in the darkness. Seeing that her own darkness was easily expelled by the light of the holy sword, Athena did not dare to underestimate it, and hurriedly raised the black scythe in her hand, and poured her divine power into it, causing the black scythe to flash with a black light. As if the darkness was solid, it emerged on the black scythe. Clang! The holy sword flashing white light and the scythe flashing black light suddenly fiercely collided, causing the white light and the black light to soar almost at the same time, like fierce beasts devouring each other, frantically eroding each other. It's not over yet. At this time, Noah suddenly clenched his free hand into a fist, and ferocious blue veins bulged on his arm, and with a whistling sound and an ear-piercing explosion, he punched towards Athena. The fist carrying great power suddenly enlarged in Athena's eyes, causing a strong fighting spirit to appear in Athena's eyes, and on her delicate body, a substantial darkness like mist shook out. Bang! The powerful punch heavily bombarded the mist-like darkness from Athena's body, causing a muffled sound that made people's hearts tremble, and also set off a violent wind, shaking the ground inch by inch. Then, the white light and black light that were eroding each other seemed to have been detonated, and the whole thing exploded. Dong! Amidst an astonishing loud noise, a violent impact mixed with white and black light blasted out, shattering the ground, disorienting the air, and causing the entire temple to tremble. Two figures simultaneously shot out from the impact of the white and black light, and the soles of their feet brushed against the ground, each drawing a mark of hundreds of meters. Then, both of them raised their eyes and looked straight at each other, their eyes surging with extremely strong emotions. As expected of my fated enemy. Just the fact that you can rival a deity in martial arts is enough to prove your strength. Driven by her high emotions, the darkness in Athena's body soared. But only like this. That's not enough. Far from enough. You are my fated enemy. Amidst the loud shout, a fatal black wind spread out from Athena's body. Chapter 1471. A storm of black wind rose from Athena's body, like a burning black flame that kept rising. In the dense darkness, Athena's figure floated like a feather. Her body was enveloped by pitch-black flames, and she raised the black scythe in her hand high above her head. Then, Athena's voice resounded from the darkness. Light can indeed expel darkness, but darkness can also devour light. My fated enemy, let Athena's darkness devour your light. In the midst of Athena's loud declaration, the darkness that was like a burning black flame suddenly twisted and turned into a giant black snake. Athena, who was floating at the 7-inch position of the giant black snake, swung her black scythe down in Noah's direction. As Athena's black scythe slashed down, the pitch-black giant snake made of dense darkness lifted its huge head and aimed at Noah, as if it was hunting for food. The upper half of its body suddenly rushed out. The giant black snake's body was quite large. Although it was not as big as the giant dragon that Letitia had summoned using the son of Ophiuchus constellation as a medium, its head alone was as big as a city. However, the head of the pitch-black giant snake was as big as a building. Therefore, when the entire upper body of the giant pitch-black snake suddenly swooped down and opened its huge mouth that was filled with dense darkness in Noah's direction, Noah's entire vision was blocked, and his clothes fluttered wildly under the attack of the wind and waves. It felt as though an entire pitch-black mountain had suddenly smashed down from the sky and was pressing down on Noah, causing his scalp to go numb. Even Noah had the same feeling. Therefore, Noah knew very well that Athena's words were not wrong. Even if the demon slayer had a strong restraining effect on darkness, if the target of the sword was too dark, it would only be devoured instead. If the demon slayer in Noah's hand was the elven magic device of the strongest sword spirit, then perhaps, with Aster's power and the support of Noah's endless divine power, no darkness could devour the light of the holy sword. However, Aster was still sleeping to awaken his true power. The demon slayer in Noah's hand was only an imitation made with the weapon refinement magic. Although the weapon refinement magic imitated the weapon's performance would not be weaker than the original, there were other restrictions. For example, the Red Dragon Emperor's boosted gear, and the White Dragon Emperor's divine dividing wings, although they could be imitated with the weapon refinement magic, they could not be imitated with the balance breaker magic. In this way, under the huge restriction of being able to use the ability once every 10 seconds, their usefulness in battle would be reduced by a lot, to the point that they would not be useful in many high-level battles. The Demon Slayer was the same. Even if it was imitated, its performance would not be weaker than Aster's before he went into hibernation. However, the imitated equipment would only have performance and not a spirit. Without the cooperation of a contracted spirit, the power of the elven magic device would be reduced by more than half. As such, the replica of the Demon Slayer might not be able to break through Athena's darkness at full power. Immediately, Noah looked at the huge pitch-black snake head that was whistling over, and a solemn expression flashed across his eyes. Thus, with a thought, Noah's divine aura source that was filled with an endless supply of divine aura in his body suddenly turned and transformed into energy once again. However, this time, the energy in the source of divine aura did not completely transform into magic power, divine aura or divine aura. Instead, with a tremor, it transformed into magic power and divine aura. In the case of using two types of energy at the same time, the output of each type of energy would be reduced by half. Fortunately, the current Noah had the dragon's sovereignty of the sun to strengthen the output of the energy, greatly reducing the disadvantage of the output being reduced by half. And the next moment, accompanied by the sound of vibration, a huge golden ripple spread out from the ground in front of Noah. Immediately, a shield that was like a city wall suddenly rose from the huge golden ripple, standing in front of Noah and firmly protecting Noah. And in the instant that the huge shield that was like a city wall suddenly appeared, the huge black snake head that was rushing over also brought along a terrifying fluctuation, whistling down and heavily landing on the thick shield. Dong! Suddenly, an earth-shattering roar resounded in this vast temple, and it shook the echo. Like invisible ripples, it carried a substantial impact and spread out. Pang! Wherever the terrifying shock wave passed, the temple floor that exuded an ancient aura suffered the most serious damage. Like broken glass, it burst open very simply. Even the rubble that was lifted up was shaken into powder, which was shocking. Pang! The terrifying shock wave was still spreading, causing the pillars that were branded with snake-shaped lines to shatter and crack under the impact. Under such circumstances, the stone pillars fell down one by one, making the entire temple seem like it was collapsing, shaking repeatedly. At this time, even the ceiling of the temple could not continue to maintain its original shape. In the sound of kacha-kacha, cracks kept appearing. Pieces of rubble suddenly fell from the ceiling, pouring down like raindrops. For a time, the entire temple seemed to be ravaged by an earthquake, and it was on the verge of collapse. It was only at this moment that the pitch-black giant serpent slowly lifted its upper body from the thick sand and dust that pervaded the air like a spring. Inside the pitch-black giant snake, Athena, holding a black scythe, stared at the spreading thick sand and dust, a pair of cold snake eyes flashing slightly. At a certain moment, Athena's pretty face changed slightly. At this instant, numerous black figures shot out from the dense sand and dust that filled the air like lightning. The bodies of the black shadows were silver chains flowing with golden light, and the front end carried wedges of different shapes. These chains shot out one after another from the thick sand and dust that filled the air. Like arrows that had been released from a bow, they shot towards the pitch-black giant serpent that had raised its huge serpent head. Then, the chains suddenly wrapped around the body of the pitch-black giant snake, binding the long snake body. The pitch-black giant snake suddenly let out a soundless roar and began to struggle with all its might, twisting its huge snake body. However, the chains were firmly wrapped around the giant snake's body. No matter how much the giant snake struggled, there was no crack at all. As the goddess of wisdom, Athena's extraordinary eyesight could see the nature of the chains tightly wrapped around the pitch-black giant snake's body. She could not help but be shocked. How could this be? However, the thing that really shocked Athena was yet to come. Golden ripples suddenly flashed in front of her like water waves. Inside, there were various weapons such as swords, sabers, spears, halberds, and so on that seemed to have popped out of the water and appeared in front of Athena's eyes. Athena's extraordinary wisdom allowed her to instantly see through the essence of each and every piece of equipment like she had just done. Therefore, Athena could almost recognize them in an instant. At this moment, each of the weapons before him was a god relic that was famous in all sorts of myths. No. That was not all. Among the weapons, there were even prototypes of famous god relics. Now, all of these weapons were aimed at Athena. In the next second, the weapons turned into beams of light and shot toward Athena, whose expression changed abruptly. Chapter 1472. Swish, 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 swish. Amidst a series of sharp and clear sonic booms, sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and all sorts of other weapons turned into beams of light. They tore through space at extreme speeds, shooting towards the giant black snake like a storm. Tightly bound by the chains, the giant black snake could not break free at all. It could only watch as the weapons turned into beams of light and shot towards it. It could not put up any resistance at all. As a result, the blades, swords, spears, halberds, and all sorts of weapons that shot out like a violent storm instantly landed on the pitch-black giant snake. Bang! Amidst the muffled explosion, a weapon that had turned into a beam of light exploded a corner of the giant black snake, forcibly cutting a hole in its surface. Bang, 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 bang. Immediately after, various weapons such as sabers, swords, spears, halberds, and so on continuously bombarded the pitch-black giant snake's body, causing the pitch-black mist-like darkness to explode one after another, causing a series of muffled explosions to ring out. With just a single wave of attacks, the gigantic pitch-black snake was riddled with holes by the weapons that came shooting over. Every part of its body was pierced through. Under such circumstances, the pitch-black snake that was riddled with holes finally couldn't even maintain its form. Dong! The black serpent made of darkness disintegrated amidst the explosion, turning back into an extremely dense darkness. In the darkness, Athena, who was holding the black scythe, retreated as if she was caught in a storm. It didn't take long for her to break through the darkness and fly out from the other end of the thick darkness. However, almost at the same time, a protrusion slowly appeared in front of the thick sand and dust on the ground. Along with the sound of tearing wind, a figure rushed out from the protrusion in the thick sandstorm, heading straight for Athena, who was retreating in midair. Athena, who was still shocked by the sight of the god relics that only existed in myths and legends, immediately raised her head and looked at the figure that was charging at her at an alarming speed. She immediately lifted the black scythe in her hand. At the same time, Noah's figure appeared in front of Athena in a flash. His pair of deep, dark eyes stared straight at Athena's slightly shocked face. He raised the holy silver sword in his hand high up and swung it down hard. Clang! The holy sword that was shining in a dazzling white light with terrifying power slashed hard on the black scythe that was hurriedly raised in midair. A powerful force instantly passed through the black scythe and hit Athena's body. Under the impact of the huge force, Athena was sent flying along with her scythe. She slammed into a stone pillar covered with snake-like patterns. She didn't know what to do next. She didn't know what to do next. Bang! With a loud explosion, the stone pillar that was hit by Athena broke and fell to the ground with a loud crash, stirring up a cloud of dust. In the dust, Athena, who had her back hit the stone pillar directly, could not help but let out an extremely soft groan. She clenched her teeth, tightened her grip on the black scythe in her hand, and swung it forward suddenly. The dust that filled the air was immediately cut open by the black scythe, and was blown away by the whistling wind that came along with the black scythe. Then, Athena saw it. Noah, who was holding the holy sword that was shining in a dazzling white light, leaped high into the air. Under the soles of his feet, a circle of divine aura gathered and exploded, releasing all of it in one breath. Noah's figure turned into a ray of light and dove down at an astonishing speed. Ultimate sword skill. Form 2 Meteor. This was the derivative of the initial form, purple lightning. The principle used was the same as the initial form of purple lightning, which was to gather the divine aura under the feet and release it in one breath. It was an ultimate sword skill that could explode at an extremely fast speed. However, unlike the initial form of purple lightning that could only be used horizontally, the second form of meteor was an ultimate sword skill that was used for aerial attacks and had absolute control of the air. Since ancient times, the side that had absolute control of the air would have a huge advantage whether it was in battle or war. This was a principle that had never changed since ancient times. After all, between an opponent who could fly and an opponent who could not, which side was more difficult to deal with, there was no need to explain. Therefore, even though the second form, meteor, was only a simple evolution of the initial form, purple lightning, turning a horizontal thrust into a high-altitude thrust, with the help of air control and the acceleration of gravity, the power and speed of this ultimate sword technique was superior to that of purple lightning. Therefore, Noah, who was holding the silver holy sword, directly turned into a meteor that fell from the sky, bringing with it a whistling wind, and violently pierced towards Athena's direction. In the blink of an eye, the tip of the silver holy sword was less than 2 meters away from Athena. In this moment of imminent peril, Athena's body suddenly burst with a black light. This was different from the extremely dense darkness from before. If the previous darkness was said to be as dense as the sewage in a swamp, then at this moment, the black light from Athena's body was like a transparent crystal. This kind of translucent black light expanded in the air, converging in front of Athena. In the midst of the trembling sound, the black light condensed and turned into a shield. It was a thick shield that seemed to be made of obsidian, with the head of a gorgon carved on the front. Noah recognized this shield. Chapter 1473. Looking at all the major mythological systems, there were only 2 sides to the shield named Aegis. One side belonged to Zeus, the king of the gods in Greek mythology. Therefore, the shield was also known as the Aegis shield. The other side belonged to Athena. It was Athena's god relic. From the perspective of Type Moon's worldview, if every heroic spirit's noble artifact was a symbol of itself and limited to all the myths and legends of the heroic spirit, then Athena's symbol was this shield. Aegis. It was a legendary shield that was exclusive to Athena. It was embedded with the head of the Gorgon Medusa and had the head of the Gorgon Medusa. It had the head of the Gorgon Medusa, and it had the ability to turn anything the head of the head looked at into cold stone. This shield was still in Athena's possession. Of course, the Aegis that Athena was currently using was only an authority manifested by divine power. In other words, Athena was able to use her authority to manifest the Aegis that she had used in the legends, and others could also use a similar method to use a replica of the Aegis. However, Athena sized up the shield in Noah's hand again and again. Athena was also holding a similar shield in her hand. Athena, who kept looking at the shield in Noah's hand, had to admit that shield was definitely not a replica. As the goddess of wisdom, Athena's extraordinary eyesight allowed her to easily recognize the ancient aura on the shield. It could not be a replica. However, that shield was definitely not the real thing. No. That might not be correct. To be more precise, the shield was definitely not the Aegis that Athena knew of. In other words, the shield that Noah was holding now was not a replica, but it was also not the Aegis that Athena knew. Could it be that there was another side to the shield that belonged to Athena? And that side was also the real thing. How was that possible? Although Zeus also had a shield named Aegis, that shield was completely different from Athena's. The most basic difference was that Athena's Aegis was embedded with the head of the Medusa, which possessed the power of petrification. On the other hand, Zeus's Aegis had the power to create a storm just by waving it around. When it was placed in the sky would darken, but when it was picked up, the sky would clear up. The only similarity between the two was that they had the same name. Moreover, they were both made from the skin of the ewe that Hephaestus gave birth to Zeus in Greek mythology. Therefore, Athena could guarantee that Aegis, which possessed the power of petrification, could not possibly have another side to it. This was because it was impossible for there to be a second Medusa's head. But if that was the case, what exactly was the divine shield in Noah's hand that had an ancient divine aura? Even the goddess of wisdom, who claimed to possess wisdom, furrowed her brows at this moment due to the conflicting reality. No, it's not just my shield. You even used many famous god relics just now, and even the original versions of those god relics. I can't be wrong. Athena stared at Noah with her seductive snake eyes, and her tone became extremely unhappy. How did you do it? Athena did not realize it at all. At this moment, her extremely unhappy tone made it seem as if she was throwing a tantrum. Athena had to admit it. Even though she was known as the goddess of wisdom, she could not tell the truth about how Noah could use those famous god relics. It was like a slap in the face, and Athena was extremely unhappy. Noah smiled faintly and threw Aegis away, allowing the golden ripples to engulf the shield. Then, he raised the sacred sword in his hand and pointed it at Athena. Do you want to know my secret? How about I ask the goddess of wisdom to solve it yourself? What a low-level provocation, my fated enemy. Athena squinted her snake eyes and pursed her lips into a smile. However, you're right. Once you've been taken into the underworld that this concubine is in charge of, and even your soul has become this concubine's possession, this concubine will then slowly unravel the mystery surrounding you. Athena stared straight at Noah as she said that. Her eyes shone as if she could see through all the secrets of a person's body. Including the secret of why you haven't used your authority until now, but you still have the power to fight against God. Athena's words made Noah's heart skip a beat. This goddess, she can even see through Noah's inability to use his power until now. You actually didn't use your full strength against me, your fated enemy. I originally wanted to teach you a lesson. Athena stared at Noah and said. But, at this point in the battle, I can see that it's not that you don't want to use your authority, but that for some reason, you can't use your authority. So, I'll forgive you. After saying that, Athena suddenly sneered. However, don't think that I will show mercy because of this. You are my fated enemy. Next, you will receive an attack that I will use all of my divine power to launch. As soon as she finished speaking, dense darkness swept out from Athena's body like a storm and soon occupied half of the entire temple. Seeing this, Noah's eyes narrowed. Under such circumstances, Athena raised the shield in her hand. At some unknown time, the shield had suddenly transformed into a powerful bow. Athena raised the bow and stared in Noah's direction. She reached out and slowly pulled the bowstring. Whing! Suddenly, the darkness that filled the sky began to gather rapidly and condensed into Athena's slowly pulled bowstring. Not long after, a pitch-black arrow appeared on the bowstring. Moreover, the monstrous curse power and darkness were constantly instilled into the pitch-black arrow, causing the temperature between heaven and earth to plummet. As the powerful curse power and darkness condensed into the pitch-black arrow one after another, Athena's face gradually turned pale. Obviously, Athena wasn't joking around. This goddess really intended to use all of her curse power to launch the final attack. Huff, looking at the darkness that seemed to be rushing towards Athena and condensing into the pitch-black arrow, Noah let out a deep breath. Noah could clearly feel it. As more and more curse power and darkness condensed into the arrow gradually began to emit extremely terrifying waves of death. Under the enhancement of the Dark Night and the Invisible Island, Athena's power surpassed that of the Great Sage. Athena's attack with all of her curse power was definitely several times more terrifying than Susanu's attack. Therefore, the next attack would also determine the outcome of the battle. Noah's ill-fated relationship with Athena would be broken after this attack. In that case, if I don't use my strongest attack, then I don't deserve to be Athena's fated enemy, right? Noah laughed bitterly, but the expression in his eyes became extremely bright. Then there's no other way. The silver holy sword in Noah's hand shattered and turned into fragments that filled the sky. Among the fragments that filled the sky, a wave-like golden ripple rippled and slowly spat out a strange-shaped sword. Noah gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. Almost in an instant, the strangely shaped sword suddenly began to spin. Upon closer inspection, the sword that suddenly rotated was not only cylindrical, but it was also made up of 3 different cylindrical blades that were linked together. At this moment, the pitch-black cylindrical blades covered with red curse patterns spun in different directions at an extremely fast speed. Waves of red wind pressure, like a storm, rose from the cylindrical rotating blade. Chapter 1474. Wang Wang Wang. The extremely dense darkness continued to surge within the temple, as if a black ocean was rolling and gathering towards a black arrow. However, Athena, who was knocking the arrow, had a serious expression on her face. Who? Amidst the violent whistling sound, waves after waves of red wind pressure rose from the cylindrical sword like a whirlwind that continuously spiraled. Holding the cylindrical sword tightly, Noah looked like he was going to insert the spinning sword into the ground. He turned the sword upside down in front of him, the tip of the sword pointed to the ground, then he met Athena's gaze. The corner of his mouth slowly raised into a rather cold arc. "You want to defeat me, goddess?" Noah's voice was extremely clear amidst the violent red wind pressure. "Then let's try. Let me see if the goddess of the Holy Trinity, Athena, can break through the power of this sword." As he spoke, Noah converted all the energy in his body into magic power, causing the vast magic power to surge into the noble artifact named Guile Separation Sword, EA. Amidst the influx of magic power, the 3 cylindrical blades on Guile Separation Sword, EA, spun faster and faster. In the end, it even let out an extremely sharp and ear-piercing sound. Amidst the sharp and ear-piercing sound, the violent red wind pressure on the Guile Separation Sword, EA, became more and more intense. It had already turned into a whirlwind and covered Noah's entire body. That scene was as if Noah had become the eye of a typhoon, causing the whirlwind to madly revolve around him. However, that wind was no ordinary wind. The best evidence was that anything that was swept by the red wind pressure, be it the ground, rocks, or debris, they were all like the most fragile pieces of paper and were cleanly crushed. In the end, the only place that remained intact was the ground that Noah was standing on. From that red wind pressure, Athena felt an extremely fatal threat. That threat was even more terrifying than the death that could be directly inflicted. The wisdom of the goddess of wisdom informed Athena. That wind pressure was absolutely untouchable. However, looking at Noah, who seemed to have become the center of the violent red wind pressure and was controlling the red hurricane, Athena could clearly sense the scorching battle intent in his eyes. Her heart was boiling with excitement all of a sudden. "I see. Is this your real challenge to the goddess?" Driven by her boiling emotions, Athena couldn't help but shout loudly. "Good. Very good. This concubine's fated enemy. Your challenge. As the queen of the gods, Athena shall accept the challenge." It was as if he was displaying his final glory. Athena raised all the curse power in her body and squandered it like it was free. Suddenly, the enormous power of the curse and the dense darkness condensed into the pitch-black arrow in an even more violent form, causing the entire world to tremble slightly and space to distort. After an unknown amount of time, the darkness and curse power that permeated the whole space slowly subsided. On the bowstring in Athena's hand, the pitch-black arrow bloomed with an extremely deep black light, causing the surrounding air to be annihilated and squeezed into nothingness little by little. The world suddenly became silent. Boom! Accompanied by a loud explosion, the pitch-black arrow turned into a huge light arrow that was hundreds of feet long and suddenly shot out. Wherever the light arrow passed, the ground seemed to be torn apart by an invisible force, causing a huge gully to be torn open and plowed the whole temple into 2 halves. The speed of the light arrow was so astonishing that people could only see a flash of light in front of their eyes. Even the sound of it breaking through the air could not be heard. The light arrow, which seemed to be able to cover the sky and the sun, heavily landed on the red hurricane amidst the tremors of the world. Boom! When the pitch-black arrow, which seemed to carry the darkness of the night sky, landed on the red hurricane, a thunder-like explosion resounded in every space of the entire invisible island. The deafening noise exploded in the temple, causing the whole temple to tremble and suddenly crack open. Then, an extremely terrifying impact, like an erupting volcano, turned into a strong wave of fire and spread out in an arc. At that moment, the few remaining pillars in the divine hall shattered one after another. The ground caved in layer by layer. It was as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting apart. It was an extremely terrifying sight. Under such a terrifying impact, even Athena could only raise her longbow and block in front of her. She tried her best to stabilize her body, but her eyes were fixed in front of her. There, the pitch-black arrows of light that blotted out the sky and the red hurricane collided with each other, setting off terrifying shockwaves that spread out in all directions. Looking at this scene, Athena's face sank bit by bit. This was because the attack, which had exhausted all of Athena's divine power, was in a deadlock with the red hurricane. It was completely unable to break through the barrier of the hurricane and touch Noah, who was inside. Within the red hurricane, Noah raised his eyes and looked at Athena, whose face had sunk. His eyes flashed and he suddenly grasped the hilt of the good parting sword, Ea. Pang! The good parting sword, Ea, which was spinning at an extreme speed, suddenly trembled and caused the red hurricane to explode. As a result, the arrow of light that collided with the red hurricane was directly swallowed by the sudden expansion of the hurricane. It was ruthlessly crushed and annihilated into nothingness. Athena stood up in shock. "Is this your full strength?" Noah laughed out loud. "Then, it's my turn." As he said this, Noah suddenly raised the good parting sword, Ea, in front of him and stabbed it in Athena's direction. Heaven and earth parting star, Enuma Elish. The violent red wind pressure that engulfed Noah's body suddenly turned into a terrifying tornado that swept out violently. The red tornado tore open the ground, tore open the temple, and tore open the entire space. It carried a huge pitch-black spatial fissure, and like a divine dragon, it swept towards Athena's direction with lightning speed. A terrifying wave of destruction frantically spread out from the pitch-black spatial fissure. Looking at the huge spatial fissure, as if it had cut open the heavens and earth layer by layer, and the mythical scene of the creation of the heavens and earth, Athena's beautiful snake eyes trembled violently. Her divine power had been exhausted. Her body stiffened. Her mind was blank. Her heart was wailing frantically. Athena could only watch as the red hurricane that tore the heavens and earth apart violently swept towards her with the pitch-black spatial fissure. Finally, as if she had seen through life and death, her eyes returned to indifference. Just like that, the red wind pressure engulfed Athena. Rumble. In the dark moonlit night, on the terrifying rocky island, the red hurricane burst out from the temple in the center, tore open the entire temple, and penetrated through one end of the temple. The red hurricane turned into the most terrifying tornado in the world. It tore open the space, split the earth, and tore the entire invisible island into two halves. Then, it separated the sea and swept into the distance. This process caused a pitch-black spatial fissure that seemed to have existed since ancient times to appear between heaven and earth. It was as if a small part of the world had been cut open, spanning across the entire invisible island. At the edge of the invisible island, Erica, Yuri, Liliana, and Kira, who were fighting against a group of dead people, were trying their best to stabilize themselves because the island had been split in half and was shaking violently. Then, looking at the pitch-black spatial fissure that spanned across the entire island as if it had opened up the heavens and earth, the girls' eyes were filled with shock and horror. The dizzy dead people suddenly looked up at the sky and roared. Then, they turned into dust and dissipated with the wind. Seeing this scene, the group of young girls understood. The outcome had been decided. Chapter 1475. In the pitch-black moonlight, the spatial fault that opened up the sky and the earth was like the Milky Way, hanging high above the seaside. That inconceivable scene immediately attracted the attention of many attentive people. Yerek, who was monitoring Lancelot's situation, looked at the mythical scene. Although his expression did not change, his palms were involuntarily clenched into fists, and his palms were already covered in sweat. That guy, how did he do it? Beside Yerek, who was pretending to be calm, Alice, who was monitoring Yerek in the form of a spirit body, was also shocked. She looked absent-mindedly at the scene that seemed to split the sky and earth, and did not recover for a long time. In the sky filled with dark clouds, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. Lancelot, who was riding on the back of a handsome white horse, his whole body was enduring the violent lightning strikes. He was accumulating his strength as he stared at the mythical scene by the seaside with an almost inconceivable eyesight, and muttered to himself, "Is this the true power of that man?" As he said this, Lancelot's whole body was slightly trembling. It was not because of fear. It was because of excitement. Even if it was me now, I would probably be reduced to ashes under such a blow. It's really scary, but the more I know, the more I want to fight that king who killed the god. As the purest, most original, and most refined steel, the battle thirst in Lancelot's heart was something that others could not compare to. Even if he knew that the enemy's power could defeat him without any ability to fight back, the more it was so, the more the purest, steel, hero wanted to challenge him. Weren't the so-called heroes such existences? Just like those heroes who went on a crusade against monsters that harmed the human world, or even those who challenged dragons. Even if they knew that their opponent was a monster, a dragon, a powerful and terrifying creature that humans could not compare to, they would still face it head-on. Just to be able to find a trace of possibility in the impossible, to defeat the enemy, and achieve great things. Therefore, when Lancelot witnessed the scene that split the sky and earth apart with his own eyes, what he felt was not fear, but excitement and excitement. I really want to fight him. Unfortunately, this wish could not be realized at the moment. It seems that even the queen of the god realm was unable to defeat that terrifying god-slayer. Guinevere appeared beside Lancelot without anyone noticing. Fear first appeared in his eyes, but it was soon replaced by determination. However, if that's the case, our plan can be realized. Hearing Guinevere's words, Lancelot sobered up a little. He forced himself to regain his rationality that was almost swallowed by the arrogance of the god of disobedience and nodded. We originally wanted to join forces with Athena to challenge the powerful god-slayer, but Athena was unbelievably obsessed with the god-slayer, so we chose to watch from the sidelines. Yes, uncle. Guinevere nodded heavily. After all, no matter who wins between Lord Noah and Lady Athena, it is a good thing for us. After learning that it was impossible to form an alliance with Athena, Guinevere immediately had a discussion with Lancelot, who was recovering his strength. In the end, both of them decided not to interfere in the battle between Noah and Athena. This was because this battle was, in fact, a rare opportunity for Guinevere and Lancelot. If Athena were to emerge victorious in this battle and kill Noah, it would naturally be the best thing for Guinevere and Lancelot, who viewed Noah as an unprecedentedly powerful enemy. However, if Noah won this battle, Guinevere and Lancelot would proceed with the next step of their plan. As the highest-level goddess of earth, the power of the draconic serpent in Athena's body can greatly stimulate the existence of steel. Guinevere finally revealed his plan. If Lord Athena is defeated by Lord Noah, then the goddess of earth who is on the brink of death will definitely channel the undying power of the draconic serpent to the greatest extent and fill this land with the essence of the earth. Guinevere closed his eyes and said as if he could feel the essence of the goddess of earth gradually filling the land. If our master is sleeping on this island, then, stimulated by the essence of the dying snake goddess, even if he does not wake up, there will be some reaction and release a little divine aura. At that time, my beloved daughter will be able to use the power of the divine ancestor to activate the power of the spirit vision. With the help of our master's connection, we will be able to find him. Lancelot said lightly. For this, we even planned that if the person who killed the god was defeated by the queen of the heavenly realm, then we would kill the goddess of earth. Now it seems that there is no need for that. This was the reason why Guinevere and Lancelot chose to watch this battle. Susanoo had also said that the power of the draconic serpent would stimulate the sleeping steel, so they needed to summon the great sage to eliminate the draconic serpent. Now, Guinevere and Lancelot planned to use this point to find the traces of the strongest steel that was sleeping on this land. But, my beloved daughter, even with the stimulation of the dying goddess of Earth's draconic serpent, the success rate of finding our master is very low. Lancelot pointed out the biggest flaw of this plan. After all, even if you are a god ancestor and have the powerful power of the spirit vision, the power of the spirit vision is not something that can be actively activated. Our failure rate is very high. Please don't worry about this, uncle. Guinevere said without any confusion. Guinevere used to be the goddess of earth. This sentence caused Lancelot to speak in surprise. My beloved daughter, are you going to undo the seal of the draconic serpent? The former goddess of earth gave up her immortal life and then fell into depravity. The existence that appeared after that was the god ancestor. In other words, the god ancestor was the former goddess of earth. In the body of such god ancestor, there was a draconic serpent seal. As long as the draconic serpent seal was undone, the god ancestor would take back the divinity, and divine power that she had when she was the goddess of earth, and fight against the god slayer and the god of disobedience. However, once this seal was undone, the immortal life of the god ancestor would also disappear in a short time. In other words, Guinevere was ready to give up her life in exchange for power. If we can stimulate the draconic serpent power of another goddess of earth, more of our master's divine aura will leak out, increasing the success rate of the spirit vision. Guinevere, who is the incarnation of the goddess of earth, can also use a more powerful spiritual eye to spy, increasing the success rate of finding our master. Guinevere turned her head and looked at Lancelot's hand. In addition, Uncle still has the remains of our master in his hands. Through it, Guinevere will be able to find the location of our master who is connected to her divine aura and awaken our sleeping master. Taking a closer look. In Lancelot's hand was a gun. It was a very ordinary gun. However, the tip of this very ordinary spear was a platinum-colored sharp blade. The sharp blade emitted an extremely dazzling light, exuding an extremely sharp aura. At first glance, one could tell that it was not an ordinary weapon. Once, in order to awaken the last king, the previous generation of Guinevere fabricated the legend of King Arthur. That was to say, King Arthur's original form was the last king in this world. In the legends of Great Britain, the most famous symbol of King Arthur was undoubtedly the sword of steel breaker, which was known as the King's Sword. Since King Arthur's original form was the last king, it meant that the existence known as the last king also had a steel blade that symbolized himself. The sword of steel was the most powerful god relic that was integrated with the last king. It was the trump card that Wang Zhanji used to annihilate the god-slaying demon king. Every time the last king annihilated all the god-slayers on the earth and fell into a deep sleep again, the remains of the sword would be left on the land where it had once roamed. Guinevere found such remains and awakened it with a secret method, creating a replica of the sword and transforming it into a gun for Lancelot to use. Chapter 1476. Clang. The platinum blade that was made into the tip of the spear shone with a dazzling light. It was a kind of blade light that could easily make people feel intoxicated. Looking at the platinum spear tip that Lancelot held tightly in his hand, Guinevere caressed it lovingly. The sword of swords, the steel of steel, the divine sword that can even cut a star. It's called the divine sword of salvation. If the hero known as the last king was King Arthur's original form, the sharp blade called the divine sword of salvation was the original form of the divine sword of salvation. It was just like what Guinevere said. It was the divine sword of salvation that could even cut a star and kill the demon king who killed a god in one hit. It was extremely powerful. One of the most important reasons why the existence known as the last king could become the nemesis of the demon king who killed gods was that he possessed the most powerful god relic that was integrated with his body. It was equivalent to a clone of himself. Now, the tip of the divine spear that Lancelot was holding was only a defective replica made from the remains of the divine saber. Not only did it not have the terrifying power of the real divine sword of salvation, but it could only be used for a limited time. There were even conditions to use it. However, even so, it still had enough power to be Lancelot's trump card. The reason why someone as astute as Yerek had miscalculated Lancelot's strength and was heavily injured by Lancelot was largely due to the existence of this divine spear. One could only imagine how powerful the true divine blade of salvation was. Naturally, Guinevere did not use the secret method to replicate the spear just to make it Lancelot's weapon. The divine sword of salvation was a god relic that was integrated with the hero who saved the world. Meanwhile, the tip of the spear in Lancelot's hand was made from the remnant of the divine sword of salvation. In other words, the tip of the spear could be regarded as a part of the last king's body. If the last king, sleeping in this land, was stimulated by the power of the two goddesses of earth's dragons and snakes, then the last king, sleeping in this land, would have a reaction and leak some divine energy. Then, through the wreckage of the sword of salvation, connected to the main body's divine energy, the possibility of finding the location of the last king would be very high with the help of the goddess of earth's spiritual eye, which was far superior to the spirit vision. For this reason, Guinevere did not hesitate to undo the seal of the dragon snake. Pa-gee, in an instant, the sound of something breaking rang out. The doll-like girl's body surged with a shocking amount of curse power. Even her body began to rapidly expand. Caw 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 caw. White and silver scales began to form on Guinevere's skin like ice. Bang! The girl's black dress, which looked like a morning dress, instantly exploded. Just like that, Guinevere's entire body began to distort. Sharp claws grew out of the front ends of his limbs, and wings grew out of his back. His pitiful face turned into a cold and sharp reptilian face, but there was a sense of solemnity on his face. In that instant, Guinevere transformed into a white dragon. It was a dragon with the body of a snake, like a divine dragon, but with a pair of enormous wings. Wang! The boundless aura of Mother Earth began to spread throughout the heaven and earth. Because Athena was on the verge of death, this world was already filled with the power of dragons and serpents. Now, coupled with the aura of the Mother Earth goddess that Guinevere had transformed into, invisible waves that could not be seen directly by the naked eye suddenly expanded in this world. Clang! As if stimulated by the abundant power of dragons and serpents, the tip of the divine spear in Lancelot's hand bloomed with a more dazzling white light than before. In the white light, Guinevere's pair of snake-like eyes flashed. Although the ability known as spirit vision was only a kind of apocalypse, sometimes it could even see the future. Now, Guinevere, who had transformed into the Mother Earth goddess, relied on the spiritual eye that was purer than spirit vision to see through the remains of the divine blade of salvation. His entire mind followed the aura of the divine blade of salvation and expanded into this world. His purpose was to search for the aura of the steel hero that rose from the remains of the divine blade of salvation after being stimulated by the aura of dragons and serpents. Not long after, Guinevere's mind was suddenly pulled to a dark place. There, Guinevere saw the scene of his dreams. This made Guinevere pleasantly surprised, and he even shouted out loud, "Uncle! I found it!" At the same time, on the invisible island that was split in half by the spatial fault that separated heaven and earth, the mythical impact gradually began to subside. Without knowing when, the darkness that covered this part of the world began to fade, allowing the stars and the full moon in the sky to suddenly appear, sprinkling a soft light. A gust of wind blew past, sweeping away all the thick sand and dust that filled the center of the invisible island. As the smoke and dust dissipated, the huge temple was exposed under the moonlight. However, the temple, which was exposed under the moonlight, was in a horrible state. Large and small cracks covered the surrounding ground and walls. Stone pillars fell to the ground, either half destroyed or completely destroyed. Pieces of rubble and debris filled every corner of the building. In addition, there was a huge deep pit located in the center of the temple, like the crater of a volcano, emitting bursts of scorched smoke and a smell. As for the ceiling, it had completely disappeared, leaving only a few pieces of it. The originally vast and towering temple seemed to have been shaken by an earthquake. Nearly half of it had collapsed and directly turned into ruins. The scene made one begin to wonder if the temple ruins had been in such a state from the beginning, instead of being destroyed in less than a few minutes. Unfortunately, this was the truth. The temple that was exposed under the moonlight with a tragic appearance was destroyed in less than a few minutes. Moreover, in the temple, there was a dark spatial fault that looked like a ferocious gap that spanned across. That kind of scene was simply something that could only be found in myths. Buzz. In the slight vibration, the cylindrical rotating blade that was previously spinning at an extremely fast speed slowly stopped, allowing the red wind pressure that lingered around the blade to dissipate. Holding the relic called the Obedient Separation Sword, EA, Noah looked in front of him speechlessly. There, the goddess who was known for her beauty and wisdom sat on the ground, her whole body intact, without a trace of injury. However, this goddess was no longer the same as before. Her whole body was fluctuating with terrifying divine power. Because of the exhaustion of her power, her body shrank from the form of a 17 or 18-year-old girl to the form of a 12 or 13-year-old girl. She clutched her chest, her face pale and tired. Seeing this, Noah was silent for a while, then sighed. As expected of the goddess who symbolizes immortality. Even if the cursed power in her body is exhausted, she can still be resurrected. Yes. Under the direct attack of the Obedient Separation Sword, EA, Athena had long been smashed to pieces, leaving no trace behind. However, after that, Athena immediately came back to life. This was a very unbelievable thing. It must be known that once, Perseus was killed by Noah because his cursed power was exhausted and he could no longer use the power of resurrection. Now, Athena had also exhausted her cursed power, but she could still come back to life. From this, it could be seen that the goddess of earth was immortal. In this regard, Athena, who was sitting on the ground, could only laugh at herself. This is the only time. I have exhausted all my power. You don't even need to use that terrifying sword. You only need to attack me again, and I will die in your hands. Athena's eyes were filled with satisfaction as she spoke. What a beautiful sword strike. You are this concubine's destined enemy. That sword strike buried this concubine, causing this concubine to lose a life. It also calmed the surging passion in this concubine's heart for you. To end with such an impeccable sword, even I have no reason to not be satisfied. Athena raised her head, looked at Noah, and said word by word. Give this concubine the final blow. You're tuning into the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.